The nightmares always start the same way. I'm back in Korea listening to the screams of dying men. Then I wake up sweating in my ranger cabin, only to realize the screams followed me home. My name is Thomas Hargrove. I'm 32 years old and I've been the head park ranger at Redwood Valley for almost 3 years now. Most people think I took this job because I love nature. Truth is, I came here to get away from people. After what I saw in Korea, being alone in these ancient trees felt like the only place I could breathe again. This morning started like any other. I limped my way through my morning routine. The leg never healed right after Heartbreak Ridge, made some strong coffee, and headed out for my daily patrol. The November air had an unusual bite to it, colder than it should be, with fog rolling in thick from the coast. I zipped my jacket higher and checked my brother's silver pocket watch. 7:15 a.m. The watch stopped working years ago, at the exact moment Jimmy died in Korea, but I still carry it everywhere. "Just you and me today, old Forrest," I muttered, enjoying the rare moment of quiet in my head. That's when I noticed something odd. A small red fox standing in the middle of the trail. Foxes aren't usually this bold, but this one just watched. Me unafraid, I crouched down, keeping still. "Hey there, little fella," I said softly. The fox tilted its head, took 2 steps toward me, then suddenly froze. Its ears perked up, and without warning it bolted into the underbrush like something had terrified it. I stood up, scanning the forest. Nothing seemed out of place, but the birds had gone quiet. That strange silence that sometimes falls over the woods when a predator is near. Probably just a mountain lion, I told myself, but I unsnapped the holster of my sidearm anyway. I continued my patrol, the fog growing thicker between the massive redwoods. These trees have stood for thousands of years. Makes a man's problem seem small by comparison. As I walked deeper into the valley, I noticed the temperature dropping steadily. Strange for midday, even in November. That's when I saw them. Deep gouges in the bark of an ancient redwood. Not unusual in itself, but these marks were a good 15 feet up the trunk, too high for any bear or mountain lion. I stepped closer, running my fingers over the splintered wood. The cuts were fresh, maybe from last night. What the hell could reach that high? I whispered. A sudden chill ran down my spine, and I could swear the temperature dropped another 10 degrees in seconds. My breath clouded in front of me, and then, so faint I almost missed it, I heard something that made my blood run cold. Hawk. Just a whisper, barely audible. I spun around, hand on my gun. Nobody was there. Nobody could be there. Because Hawk wasn't my name. It was my nickname in Korea. The one only my dead squad members ever used. The one no living person in Redwood Valley could possibly know. I tried to shake off that strange voice, telling myself it was just the wind through the trees or my mind playing tricks. After spending enough time alone in these woods, you start to hear things that aren't there. The next morning, I got a call on the ranger station radio. Sheriff Whitaker's gruff voice crackled through the static. "Hargrove, you there? We've got another missing person report." I sighed, picking up the handset. "Who is it this time, Sheriff?" "Group of 3 hunters. Supposed to check in with their families 2 days ago. Never did." He paused. "That makes 5 people gone missing in these woods this month." My stomach tightened. 5 is a lot, even for this terrain. "Probably just city folks who don't know how to read a compass," Whitaker said, but I could hear the worry in his voice. "Can you check their last known location? I'll send the coordinates." After jotting down the details, I grabbed my pack and headed out. The new junior ranger, Marcus Fletcher, was waiting by the trailhead. Young kid, maybe 24, eager smile, too much energy. He'd been assigned to me last month. "Morning, sir." Fletcher said, bouncing on his heels. "Heard we're looking for missing hunters." I nodded, not returning his smile. Something about Fletcher always put me on edge. Maybe it was knowing he'd dodged the draft while I was watching my friends die in Korea. Not that I'd ever say it out loud. "We're heading to Blackwater Creek," I told him. "Stay close. These woods can swallow you whole if you're not careful." The hike took 3 hours. When we reached the hunter's campsite, something felt wrong right away. The tents were still pitched, sleeping bags laid out, A pot of beans sat on a cold campfire, half-eaten meals on plates beside it. Looks like they just got up and walked away in the middle of dinner, Fletcher said, picking up a fork. Don't touch anything, I snapped. I circled the camp looking for signs of struggle, animal tracks, anything. There was nothing. No blood, no scattered gear, no drag marks. Just an empty camp that felt like everyone had vanished in the blink of an eye. As I inspected the tree line, an old man emerged from the forest. I recognized him immediately, one of the tribal elders from the reservation that bordered the national forest. He stood at the edge of the camp, refusing to step closer. Mr. Watkins, I called out. Did you see anything unusual up here lately? The old man's face was grim. You shouldn't be here, Ranger, not in this valley. We're looking for missing hunters, Fletcher explained. Watkins shook his head. This is the Hungry One's domain. Has been for generations. He pointed deeper into the valley. My people don't go there. Not since the old times. The Hungry One? Fletcher asked with a smirk. The old man didn't smile back. It waits. It watches. It hungers. He turned to leave, then paused. If you hear voices calling you into the deep woods, Ranger Hargrove, don't follow them, no matter whose voice it is. After he left, Fletcher laughed. Well, that wasn't creepy at all. I didn't laugh. Something about the old man's warning had stirred up an uneasy feeling in my gut. The kind of feeling I'd learned to trust in Korea, the one that told me when an ambush was coming. As we continued searching the area, the forest grew unusually quiet. No birds calling, no squirrels chattering, just the sound of our own breathing and footsteps. That's when I heard it again. A whisper, just behind my ear. Hawk, over here. I whirled around, heart pounding. Nothing there. Just trees and shadows. You okay, sir? Fletcher asked, giving me a strange look. Did you hear that? I asked. Hear what? I shook my head. Nothing. Let's keep moving. But as we hiked back to the ranger station that evening, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us from the trees. Something that knew my name from Korea. Something that was just getting started. The next few days were quiet, but my sleep got worse. Each night the dreams of Korea came back stronger. Only now the battlefields were mixed with redwood trees and the enemy soldiers had antlers growing from their heads. I woke up early before sunrise and found Fletcher already at the station, making coffee. You look terrible, he said, sliding a mug across the desk to me. Thanks, I muttered, taking a sip. Did you finish the report on that hunting camp? Fletcher nodded. All typed up. Sheriff thinks they just got lost. 5 people don't just get lost at the same time, I said. And they don't leave a hot meal behind to do it. Fletcher shrugged. Maybe a bear scared them off? No bear tracks, I reminded him. No tracks of any kind. After breakfast, we headed back into the forest for our patrol. I wanted to check a section of the valley we hadn't explored yet. The weather had turned even colder, with a strange mist clinging to the forest floor that never seemed to burn off, even in midday sun. About 2 hours in, Fletcher stopped suddenly, pointing ahead. Sir, look at that. In a small clearing lay the body of a deer, at least what was left of it. The animal had been torn open with unnatural precision, like a surgeon had cut it. The organs were missing, but there was almost no blood on the ground around it. Mountain lion? Fletcher suggested, but his voice shook a little. I crouched down, examining the carcass. No mountain lion does this. Look at these cuts. Clean, straight, and where's all the blood? As we continued our patrol, we found 2 more deer in the same condition. Each one cut open cleanly, organs removed, no blood. And strangest of all, no tracks around any of them. Something's not right, I said. Let's head back and radio this in. But when we got back to the ranger station, the radio wasn't working. Right. I turned the dial trying to find the sheriff's frequency, but all we got was static and strange, muffled sounds that almost sounded like voices. Piece of junk, Fletcher muttered, hitting the side of the radio. Been acting weird all week. I tried the backup radio, but it was dead too. Then I noticed something else. The compass on my desk was spinning wildly, the needle whirling in circles instead of pointing north. "That's not normal," Fletcher said, staring at it. That night, I couldn't sleep at all. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the Korean hills covered in snow and blood. I heard my brother Jimmy calling my name, just like he did before he died. Around 3 a.m. I gave up and went to sit on the station's porch with a cup of coffee. The forest was dead silent. No owls, no crickets, no wind in the trees. Nothing. In all my years as a ranger, I'd never heard the woods this quiet. Then I noticed something else. The temperature had dropped so much I could see my breath, even though it was only September. My coffee was steaming like crazy in the cold air. A twig snapped in the darkness and I reached for my flashlight. The beam cut through the mist, lighting up the trees at the edge of the clearing. For just a second I thought I saw something move between two massive redwoods, something tall and thin that walked on two legs. But when I focused the light, nothing was there. I was about to go back inside when my flashlight caught something on the ground near the forest edge. I walked over slowly, my hand resting on my sidearm. There, arranged in a perfect circle about 3 feet across, were tiny bones. Dozens of them, carefully placed in a pattern that reminded me of a compass or a star chart. Some looked like they came from small animals, squirrels, rabbits, birds. Others I couldn't identify. I'd been a hunter all my life before becoming a ranger. I'd never seen any animal do this. As I stared at the bone circle, the radio inside, the station suddenly came to life, blaring static and broken words that made no sense. Then, clear as day, I heard a voice come through the speaker, a voice I recognized from my past. "Hawk, we need backup. They're coming over the ridge." "Hawk!" It was Sergeant Miller's voice, the same words he'd shouted to me in Korea, right before. A mortar shell hit his position. Sergeant Miller, who'd been dead for 7 years. I ran back inside to the radio, but by the time I got there, it had gone silent again. Fletcher emerged from his room, rubbing his eyes. "Was that the radio? Did we get through to someone?" I stared at him, my hands shaking. "No," I said finally. "Just interference." But we both knew it was something else. Something was in these woods with us. Something that knew things it shouldn't know. And it was getting closer. The next morning we got word that 2 hikers had gone missing. A young couple who'd set out 3 days ago on the North Trail. With the radio acting up, Sheriff Whitaker had driven all the way to the station to tell us in person. "I'm getting pressure from the county," he said, looking tired. 5 missing hunters was bad enough, now these 2 kids. People are starting to talk. "Talk about what?" Fletcher asked. The sheriff sighed. "Ghost stories, monster tales, the usual nonsense that comes out when people get scared." He looked at me. "I need you two to find those hikers, Hargrove. Alive, preferably. We geared up for an overnight search. Packs, sleeping bags, extra ammunition." I didn't tell the sheriff about the strange things we'd been seeing. He already thought I was jumpy from the war. No need to give him more reason to doubt me. The North Trail was the longest and most remote in the park, winding through ancient groves where the redwoods grew so thick they blocked out most of the sunlight. The deeper we went, the colder it got, until it felt more like December than early fall. By mid-afternoon, we'd found the hikers' last campsite. Like the hunters, their gear was still there, but the people were gone. No signs of struggle, no blood, no tracks leading away. "I don't like this," Fletcher said, voice low. "It's like they just vanished." We pushed on, following the trail until we came to a small ridge overlooking a valley I'd never seen before, which was impossible. I'd hiked every inch of this forest for 3 years. "Sir," Fletcher said suddenly, grabbing my arm. "Did you hear that?" I listened. At first, nothing. Then faintly, a woman's voice calling from the valley below. "Help us. Please, someone." We scrambled down the slope toward the voice. The mist grew thicker as we descended until I could barely see Fletcher just a few feet ahead of me. The voice called again, sounding farther away now. "This way," Fletcher shouted, pushing ahead. "Wait," I called after him. "Stay together!" But he was already moving fast through the trees. I tried to follow, but my bad leg slowed me down. The mist swirled around me, and within seconds, I'd lost sight of him completely. "Fletcher," I called out. No answer. I stopped, trying to get my bearings. The forest had gone completely silent again. No birds, no wind, nothing. Just thick, cold mist between the massive tree trunks. Then I saw it. About 50 yards away, standing between two redwoods, was a figure. Tall, unnaturally tall, at least 9 feet. So thin it looked almost skeletal. And rising from its head were what looked like massive antlers, branching out like dead trees against the fog. I froze, my hand moving slowly to my gun. The figure didn't move. It just stood there watching me. Even from that distance, I could feel its eyes on me. "Fletcher?" I called out, my voice barely a whisper. The figure tilted its head like a curious dog. Then, with movement so fast I almost missed it, it was suddenly gone. Not running away, not hiding. Just gone. Like it had never been there at all. My heart hammered in my chest as I drew my gun, scanning the trees. The temperature had dropped so much I was shivering now, my breath making thick clouds in front of my face. "Fletcher," I shouted, no longer caring if anything heard me. "Over here." His voice came from my left. I rushed toward it, pushing through the underbrush until I found him standing in a small clearing looking confused. "Did you see it?" I asked, grabbing his shoulder. "See what?" He looked at me strangely. I was following that woman's voice. But then it stopped. "Did you hear it too?" I didn't answer his question. "We need to get back to the ridge, now." As we climbed back up the slope, Fletcher suddenly stopped and pointed to the ground. "Sir, look at this." In a small hollow between tree roots lay a careful arrangement of bones, just like the one I'd found outside the station, but bigger. These bones weren't from small animals. Some looked human. "What would do this?" Fletcher whispered. Before I could answer, a twig snapped behind us. We both spun around, my gun raised. There was nothing there, but scratched into the trunk of the nearest redwood, fresh and deep, was a strange symbol. A circle with lines radiating outward, like a crude drawing of the sun, or like the antlers of what I'd just seen. "We need to go," I said. "Right now." As though. We hurried back toward the trail. I heard it again, a whisper right behind me, so close it could have been someone leaning over my shoulder. "Hawk, I'm coming for you next." I whirled around, but all I saw was Fletcher, looking at me with growing concern. "Sir, are you okay?" I nodded, not trusting my voice, because the whisper hadn't just been any voice. It had been my dead brother, Jimmy's voice, perfect down to the slight southern drawl he never could shake, and nothing in this world should have known what that sounded like. We made it back to the ranger station just as night fell. I was jumpy, checking over my shoulder every few minutes, feeling like something was following us the whole way. Fletcher noticed but didn't say anything until we were safely inside with the doors locked. "Sir, what did you see out there?" he asked, handing me a cup of coffee. I sat heavily in my chair, unsure how much to tell him. Would he think I was crazy? Maybe I was. Maybe the war had finally broken something in my head that couldn't be fixed. I started, then shook my head. I'm not sure what I saw. Fletcher sat across from me. "With all due respect, sir, that's bull. You saw something that scared you, and I've never seen you scared before." I looked at him, then decided to risk the truth. "I saw something in the trees. Tall, thin. Had what looked like antlers." I rubbed my face. "And I keep hearing voices. People I knew in Korea. People who died there." I expected him to laugh or look concerned. Instead, he just nodded slowly. "Heard something too," he admitted. "When we were separated, it wasn't a hiker calling for help." He swallowed hard. It was my mother's voice. "Your mother?" "She died when I was 16. Cancer." Fletcher stared into his coffee. But it was her voice, clear as day, calling my name from the trees. We sat, in silence for a minute, letting that sink in. "We need to call for backup," I said finally, reaching for the radio. To my surprise, it worked perfectly this time. I got through to Sheriff Whitaker right away and told him we needed help searching for the missing hikers. I didn't mention what we'd seen or heard, just said the terrain was too rough for just two of us to cover. I'll be there at first light. With 2 deputies, the sheriff promised. That night, neither of us slept. We took turns keeping watch, jumping at every sound from the forest. Around 3 a.m. during my shift, I could have sworn I saw something moving at the edge of the trees. A tall shadow that seemed to watch the station. But when I shone my flashlight, nothing was there. The sheriff arrived early the next morning with his deputies. They looked fresh and well-rested, which only highlighted how ragged Fletcher and I must have appeared. "You boys look like you've seen a ghost," Whitaker said, frowning. "Something like that," I muttered. We led them to where we'd found the hikers' camp, then down to the valley where I'd seen the figure. In the daylight, everything looked different. Normal. The mist was gone, the birds were singing again, and the temperature was mild. A perfect fall day. When we reached the spot where Fletcher and I had found the bone arrangement, there was nothing. There. Not a single bone, not even a depression in the soil where they had been. The sheriff gave me a long look. "You sure this is the right place, Hargrove?" Fletcher jumped in. "Yes, sir. We both saw it. Right here." The deputies searched the area but found nothing unusual. No strange scratches on trees, no sign of the missing hikers, no tall figures with antlers. After a few hours, the sheriff called it off. "Look," he said to me privately as the others packed up. "I know Korea was rough on you. My brother came back from the Pacific with shell shock too." "This isn't shell shock," I insisted. He put a hand on my shoulder. "Take a few days off, Thomas. Get some rest. Fletcher can handle things for a bit." I wanted to argue, but what could I say? That I was seeing monsters in the woods? That the forest was whispering to me in dead men's voices? He'd have me committed. So I nodded, and we all hiked back to the station together. The whole way I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched, that something was following us, staying just out of sight. At the station, the sheriff and his deputies got in their car to leave. As they pulled away, Whitaker rolled down his window. "Radio if you need anything," he said, "but try to get some sleep first. You look like hell." Fletcher and I watched them drive away, leaving us alone again with the ancient forest looming around us. "He thinks you're cracking up," Fletcher said once they were gone. "Aren't I?" I asked. Fletcher shook his head. "If you are, then so am I, because I know what I heard out there." We went inside the station. I was exhausted but too wired to sleep. Fletcher made more coffee, and we sat at the desk reviewing maps of the area, trying to make sense of where all these people could have disappeared to. That's when we noticed it, scratched into the wooden floor behind the desk, fresh and deep. The same circular antler-like symbol we'd seen on the tree in the forest, inside our locked station. "It was inside," Fletcher whispered, face pale. "It was in here with us." I checked. All the doors and windows. All still locked, no signs of forced entry. Nothing was missing or disturbed except for that one scratched symbol in a place neither of us would have noticed if we hadn't moved the desk. "It's playing with us," I said, the realization making my blood run cold. "Whatever it is, it's not just hunting. It's enjoying this." As if in answer, the temperature in the station suddenly plummeted. Our breath clouded in front of our faces, and the coffee in our mugs began to steam like crazy. Then the radio crackled to life all by itself. Through bursts of static, we heard a voice, Fletcher's voice, saying words he wasn't speaking. "They never found the bodies in Korea, did they? Hawk? They're still there, waiting for you to come back." Fletcher stared at the radio, then at me, his eyes wide with fear. "That's not me," he whispered. "I swear to God, that's not me." But it was his voice. Perfect in every way. Just like the voices of the dead men I'd been hearing. Part 6. Delao. Hunt Begins night fell early, bringing with it a storm that rattled the windows of our small station. Fletcher and I had pushed all the furniture against the doors and windows. Not that it would do much good against something that could get in without breaking anything. "What do we do now?" Fletcher asked, checking his sidearm for the 3rd time. "Wait. For morning," I said. "Then get the hell out of these woods and bring back real help." The lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely. The sudden darkness felt heavy, pressing in on us from all sides. I fumbled for my flashlight, clicking it on. The beam seemed weak, barely cutting through the blackness. "Generator must have failed," Fletcher said, his face ghostly in the flashlight's glow. I shook my head. "Generator was full of gas this morning. Checked it myself." We stood in silence, listening to the wind howl outside. The temperature kept dropping until I could see ice crystals forming on the inside of the windows. It had to be below freezing in the station now, colder than it had any right to be in September. "You hear that?" Fletcher whispered suddenly. I listened. At first, nothing but the storm. Then, faintly, a voice calling from outside. "Marcus, please help me." Fletcher's face went white. "That's my mother," he whispered. "It's not real," said firmly, grabbing his arm. "Whatever's out there, it's using our memories against us. Don't listen." The voice came again, louder this time. "Marcus, honey, I'm hurt. Please come help me." Fletcher pulled away from me, moving toward the window. His eyes had a glazed look, like he was sleepwalking. "Fletcher," I snapped. "Stay put." But he wasn't listening anymore. He was staring out the window where a figure stood in the stormy darkness. I couldn't see it clearly, just a woman's shape, hand outstretched toward the glass. "Mom?" Fletcher whispered. Before I could stop him, he was unlocking the door. "Fletcher, no." I lunged for him, but too late. He yanked the door open and stepped outside into the storm. I rushed after him, flashlight beam cutting through the rain. Fletcher was walking toward the tree line, moving like a man in a trance. The figure that had looked like a woman from inside was gone. "Fletcher, get back here," I shouted over the wind. He stopped at the edge of the forest, looking around confusedly, as if waking up. He turned back toward me. "Hargrove? What happened? Why am I—" That's when it took him. Something moved in the darkness behind him, something huge. I caught just a glimpse of it in my flashlight beam. A skeletal, towering shape with massive antlers that seemed to shift and change even as I watched. Long, thin arms reached out from the shadows. Fletcher didn't even have time to scream. One moment he was standing there, the next he was yanked upward into the trees with impossible speed, vanishing into the darkness above. "Fletcher!" I screamed, drawing my gun and running toward where he'd disappeared. Rain lashed my face as I reached the spot where he'd been standing. I shone my light up into the trees but saw nothing. No Fletcher, no creature, nothing but wet branches swaying in the wind. A sound came from deeper in the forest, Fletcher's voice calling my name. "Hargrove, help me!" I knew it was a trap. Knew I should go back to the station, radio for help, wait for daylight. But what if Fletcher was still alive? What if there was a chance? I plunged into the forest, following the sound of his voice. The beam of my flashlight seemed to grow weaker with each step, barely penetrating the darkness between the massive redwoods. The rain soaked through my jacket, chilling me to the bone. "Fletcher," I called, my voice swallowed by the storm. His voice answered from ahead, sounding pained. "Here, I'm hurt." I pushed forward, my bad leg aching, slipping on the wet ground. The trees around me seemed different somehow, older, more twisted, packed closer together. I realized with a jolt that I didn't recognize this part of the forest, even though I'd thought I knew every inch of the valley. A flash of movement caught my eye, something darting between trees ahead of me. I raised my gun, following it with the flashlight. "Fletcher?" I called. The forest answered with his voice, but it came from behind me now. "Why did you leave me, Hargrove?" "It's got me." I spun around, heart hammering. Nothing there. When I turned back, my flashlight beam fell on a figure standing 20 yards ahead. A soldier in a Korean War uniform, his face hidden in shadow. "No," I whispered. "You're not real." The soldier lifted his head, and I saw my brother Jimmy's face, pale and bloodied, just like the last time I'd seen him alive. "You left us there to die, Hawk," he said, his voice exactly as I remembered. "You ran and left us all to die." "You're not my brother," I said, raising my gun with shaking hands. Jimmy smiled, but it wasn't his smile. It was wrong somehow. Too wide, too many teeth. Then shoot me, Hawk, put another bullet in your brother. My finger tensed on the trigger. This wasn't Jimmy. It couldn't be. Jimmy was buried in a military cemetery in Ohio. This was that thing, that creature using my memories against me. I fired 3 times, the gunshots cracking through the stormy night. The bullets hit the figure square in the chest, but it didn't fall. Instead, it flickered like a bad television signal, then dissolved into mist that was quickly swept away by the wind. The forest fell silent for a moment. Then, all around me, voices began to whisper. Jimmy, Sergeant Miller, other men from my unit in Korea, all talking at once, their words overlapping until I couldn't make out what any of them were saying. I backed up against a tree trunk, gun raised, turning in circles as the voices seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Show yourself," I shouted into the darkness. The voices stopped abruptly. The silence that followed was worse somehow. Then from behind a massive redwood stepped Fletcher. "Hargrove," he said, looking dazed. "Thank God. I thought it got you too." I kept my gun raised, not trusting what I was seeing. "Stay where you are. What happened to you?" "It dragged me up into the trees," he said, taking a step toward me. "I managed to get away when it went after something else. A deer, I think." "Don't come any closer," I warned. Fletcher stopped, raising his hands. "It's me, sir, I swear." He looked like Fletcher, sounded like Fletcher, but something was off. His movements were too smooth, his eyes too still in the flashlight beam. "What's your mother's name?" I asked, keeping my gun steady. Fletcher smiled. "Eleanor." I tightened my finger on the trigger. "Your mother's name was Sarah. You told me that your first day at the station." The thing that looked like Fletcher tilted its head, that too wide smile spreading across its face again. When it spoke, it wasn't with Fletcher's voice anymore, but a dry, rasping sound, like dead leaves blowing across stone. "Clever Hawk," it whispered. "Always watching. Always listening." Then its form began to change, stretching upward, thinning, until what stood before me wasn't Fletcher at all, but the antlered creature I'd glimpsed before. 9 feet tall at least, skin like dried leather stretched over bone, with eyes that glowed a sickly yellow in the darkness. I fired the rest of my bullets into it, but it moved with that impossible speed again, vanishing into the shadows before the first shot hit. Its voice came from the darkness all around me. "I'm going to wear your skin next, Hawk. Just like I'm wearing your friend's now." Cold dread washed over me. "Where is Fletcher?" I demanded. "What did you do to him?" Laughter echoed through the trees. A horrible, inhuman sound. "Come find out," it whispered. I stumbled through the forest, rain soaking me to the skin, my empty gun still clutched in my hand. The creature was toying with me, leading me deeper, into unknown parts of the valley. Every few minutes I'd glimpse it between the trees, sometimes as the antlered thing, sometimes wearing Fletcher's face, sometimes as Jimmy or one of my dead squad mates. My flashlight was fading, the beam growing. Weaker by the minute, I had no idea which direction led back to the ranger station. The forest I thought I knew so well had become a maze of identical redwood trunks and unfamiliar paths. "What do you want?" I shouted into the darkness, my voice hoarse. The answer came, from right behind me, in Fletcher's voice. "Company." I whirled around, but again nothing was there. I kept moving, driven by the hope that Fletcher might still be alive somewhere. The rain finally stopped, but the cold remained, a deep, biting chill that seemed to come from inside the forest itself. Dawn was breaking by the time I entered a narrow ravine I'd never seen before. Steep walls of rock rose on either side, with just enough space between them for a man to walk. Old, gnarled redwoods grew at odd angles from the rock face, their roots exposed like twisted fingers. Something caught my eye, a flash of color against the dark forest floor. I moved closer and felt my stomach drop. It was Fletcher's ranger hat, lying beside what looked like a bundle of clothing. Only it wasn't clothing, it was Fletcher, or what was left of him. He'd been opened up the same way as the deer we'd found, precise cuts, organs removed, hardly any blood. His eyes were open, staring sightlessly at the canopy above. But the worst part was his expression. Not fear or pain, but a look of peaceful sleep, like whatever had killed him had done it while he dreamed. I fell to my knees beside him, grief and rage boiling up inside me. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I should have protected you." A twig snapped behind me. I turned slowly, knowing what I would see. The creature stood at the entrance to the ravine, its antlers scraping the rock walls on either side. In the gray dawn, light I could see it clearly for the first time. The stretched skin, the two long limbs, the eyes that changed color even as I watched, shifting from yellow to deep red. "You led me here," I said, standing up. "You wanted me to find him." The creature's mouth opened in what might have been a smile. "I wanted you to see my work," it said, its voice like stones grinding together. The young one was easy, no real fear in him. But you, Hawk, it tilted its head. You have such delicious fear. Years of it, layered like tree rings. I looked around desperately for a weapon, anything I could use. My hand closed around a sharp rock about the size of my fist. "What are you?" I asked, trying to keep it talking while I looked for a way out. "I am hunger," it said simply. "I am the thing that waits in dark places. I am what humans become when they forget to be human." It took a step toward me, moving with that unnatural, "Your kind has many names for me. Wendigo, the hungry one, the spirit of the lonely places." Another step. "I've been in these woods since before the first redwood took root." I backed up, but the ravine narrowed behind me. I was being herded into a dead end. That's when I realized this wasn't just a random encounter. The creature had planned this, leading me step by step to this box canyon where I had nowhere to run. Unless I looked up at the steep rock walls. They were rough, with plenty of handholds. If I could climb up and out— "You won't make it," the creature said, following my gaze. "None of them ever do." "The others," I said. "The missing people. Did you—" "Some I ate," it said matter-of-factly. "Others I kept alive longer. Their fear was sweeter that way." It gestured to the canyon walls. "Look up, Hawk. See my collection." I raised my eyes and had to choke back a scream. High up on the rock walls, tucked into small crevices and wedged between tree roots, were bones. Hundreds of them. Human skulls, rib cages, femurs, all arranged in the same circular patterns we'd found in the forest. "Why?" I whispered. "Why does the wolf hunt deer?" it asked. "Why does the owl take mice? I am a predator. You are prey." It was close now. Close enough that I could smell it. A cold, musty scent, like an abandoned cellar. I gripped my rock tighter, knowing it would do nothing against this thing but unwilling to die without a fight. Then I had an idea. The walls of the ravine were unstable. Loose rocks, exposed roots, cracks running through the stone. This whole place looked like it could come down with the right push. "You're right," I said, taking another step back. "I am afraid. I've been afraid since Korea. Since I watched my brother die. Since I ran and left my men behind." The creature tilted its head, intrigued by my sudden admission. "That's why you picked me, isn't it?" I continued, glancing quickly at the rock wall beside me. "You smelled my guilt, my fear." "Yes," it hissed, pleased. "The frightened ones taste better." "Well, I'm not running anymore," I said, and lunged forward suddenly, driving my shoulder into its midsection. The creature was surprisingly light, like hitting a bundle of sticks wrapped in leather. It staggered back, more surprised than hurt. But that moment of confusion was all I needed. I dodged around it and ran for the entrance to the ravine, where the walls were highest and most unstable. The creature recovered quickly and came after me, moving with that terrible speed. Just before it reached me, I turned and hurled my rock, not at the creature, but at a massive redwood root protruding from the canyon wall. The root was holding back a section of loose rock and soil. My aim was true. The rock struck the root hard, cracking it with a sound like a gunshot. For a second, nothing happened. Then, with a low rumble that quickly grew to a roar, the wall of the ravine began to collapse. Tons of rock and soil poured down, along with two massive redwoods that had been growing at the edge. The creature looked up, its changing eyes widening. It tried to leap away, but the avalanche was too fast, too massive. It disappeared under a cascade of stone and wood. I threw myself flat against the opposite wall as debris thundered down, covering my head with my arms. The noise was deafening, the dust choking. For what seemed like forever, the world was nothing but falling rock and the cracking of massive tree trunks. When it finally stopped, I opened my eyes to find myself half buried in dirt and small stones, but alive. The ravine was completely blocked now, a wall of rubble sealing off the far end where the creature had been. I dug myself out slowly, every muscle screaming in pain. My leg was worse than ever, and I'd taken a bad cut to my forehead that was bleeding into my eyes, but I was alive. There was no sign of the creature in the rubble, no movement, no sound, just silence. I limped out of the ravine, and after several hours of wandering, finally found my way back to the ranger station. The first thing I did was radio the sheriff. "Whitaker, it's Hargrove. Fletcher's dead, killed by..." I paused, knowing how it would sound. "Killed by a bear. I found his body in a ravine east of Blackwater Creek." The next few days passed in a blur. Search parties found Fletcher's body where I'd left it. They blamed a rogue bear for his death and the missing hikers. I didn't correct them. What would I say? That an ancient monster that fed on fear had killed them all. I spent 2 weeks in the county hospital with a concussion, a fractured wrist, and a fever that came and went. When they released me, I went back to the ranger station, despite the sheriff's concerns. "You sure you want to go back out there alone?" he asked. "After what happened to Fletcher?" I nodded. "I need to finish the job." The truth was, I couldn't leave. Not until I was sure it was over. Not until I was sure that thing was really dead. For months, nothing happened. The forest returned to normal. Birds sang, animals returned to their usual patterns, and no more hikers went missing. Sometimes I'd wake up in the night, heart pounding, thinking I'd heard a voice calling my name, but it was just the wind or my own dreams. I started to believe it was over, that I'd actually killed the thing in the ravine. Then came the storm. It was a bad one, howling down from the north with freezing rain and winds strong enough to topple trees. I was sitting in the ranger station, radio beside me in case any stranded hikers called for help when the power went out. The station went dark, lit only by flashes of lightning outside the windows. I reached for my flashlight, clicked it on, and the radio crackled to life. Through bursts of static, I heard Fletcher's voice, clear as day. "Hargrove, can you hear me? I'm still out here. It's still got me." I stared at the radio, my blood turning to ice in my veins. "It's not dead, Hargrove," the voice continued. "It's coming back for you. It's hungry again." I grabbed my rifle from the rack on the wall, checked to make sure it was loaded. Then I put on my coat, my hat, and strapped on my sidearm. Outside, the storm raged, bending the mighty redwoods like they were saplings. Rain lashed down in sheets, and lightning split the sky every few seconds. No sane person would go out in this, but I wasn't sane anymore. Not after what I'd seen, not after what I'd heard. I stepped out into the storm, rifle in hand, and headed for the tree line where I'd first seen the creature. If it was still alive, if it was coming back for me, then this time, I'd be ready. This time, I wouldn't run. I walked into the dark forest. I felt a strange sense of peace settle over me. The fear that had followed me since Korea was gone, replaced by a cold, steady resolve. Let it come. Let it try to use my fears against me again. I wasn't afraid anymore. The rain plastered my hair to my face as I walked deeper into the ancient redwoods, leaving the lights of the ranger station behind. Ahead, there was only darkness and the sound of the storm. And somewhere in that darkness, something waited. Something hungry. Something that knew my name. I still remember the smell. Pine needles baking in the afternoon sun, mixing with the wild sage that grew in patches along Eagle Peak's eastern slopes. That smell meant freedom to me. It meant I was where I belonged. My name is Catherine Mendoza. Kit. To everyone who knows me. At 29, I was the first female ranger in this district of the Colorado Rockies, and boy did I have to fight for that title. Every day felt like I was proving myself all over again. That day, the day everything started, was supposed to be my day off. A rare luxury in late summer when the trails filled with hikers trying to squeeze in one last adventure before fall. I'd hiked up to my favorite ridge, the one with the perfect view of the valley. I'd brought my camera to catch the special blue moon that was coming, a full lunar eclipse that only happens once in a generation. I'd spread out my red checkered blanket on a flat rock and unwrapped my sandwich when I noticed something weird. A group of deer were moving through the clearing below me, in broad daylight. Anyone who knows anything about deer knows they don't usually wander around at noon. They were moving fast too, like something was chasing them. "What's got you spooked?" I whispered, setting down my sandwich and grabbing my binoculars. The birds seemed off too. A flock of ravens circled overhead, their pattern all wrong, jerky and frantic. I'd spent enough time in these mountains to know when something wasn't right. That's when I saw the tracks. They started in the middle of a mud patch near the stream, just appeared out of nowhere, like whatever made them had dropped from the sky. Big tracks, bigger than any wolf I'd ever seen, but walking on two legs like a person. I followed them, my heart beating faster with each step. Then they just stopped, right in the middle of open ground. No jumping to a rock, no turning around. They simply vanished like whatever made them had disappeared into thin air. I crouched down, running my fingers along the edge of the last print. "What the hell are you?" I muttered. The sun was starting to set when I packed up my things. The mountains turned a beautiful pink-orange in the fading light. Alpenglow, we call it. Usually it's my favorite time of day, but something felt wrong about this sunset. Too quiet, maybe. The birds had stopped singing altogether. Then I heard it. A howl, but not like any wolf I'd ever heard in these mountains. It was deeper, longer, with a strange catch in the middle that almost sounded like words. My skin prickled, with goosebumps despite the warm evening air. Another howl answered the first, this one closer. Then another from a different direction. They were all around me. I reached for the hunting knife my dad had given me before he died in these same mountains 13 years ago. The weight of it was comforting, though I knew a knife wouldn't do much good against a wolf pack. My radio crackled to life, making me jump. "Mendoza, you copy?" "Over." It was Bill Hoffman's voice, my boss and reluctant mentor. I pressed the talk button. "Copy, Hoffman. What's up? Over." "Got a situation. Family of 4, the Millers, 24 hours overdue from Coyote Trail. Last check-in was at North Point Camp. Need you back at station to organize search." Over. I looked at the darkening sky, then back toward the trail where I'd seen those strange tracks. A family was missing. My day off would have to wait. On my way, ETA 40 minutes over and out. As I hiked back down the trail, the howling started again, closer this time. I quickened my pace, my hand never leaving the handle of my knife. Something moved in the trees to my right, just a flash of gray, too big to be a normal wolf. By the time I reached my Jeep, the first stars were appearing in the sky, and the strange blue moon was rising over the mountains. It seemed bigger than normal, with a reddish tint around the edges. I didn't know it then, but that night would change everything. Not just for me, but for everyone who entered those mountains under that cursed blue moon. As I started my Jeep, I glanced in the rearview mirror and froze. For just a second, I thought I saw a pair of eyes reflecting in the darkness of the tree line. Not the normal green-yellow of an animal's eyes, but multicolored, like an oil slick on water. I blinked, and they were gone. The radio crackled again. "Mendoza, what's your status? Over." I swallowed hard and put the Jeep in gear. On my way over, I drove toward the ranger station, feeling those strange eyes watching me long after they disappeared. The headlights of my Jeep cut through the darkness as I pulled into the ranger station. The small wooden building looked lonely against the night sky with just one window glowing yellow. Bill Hoffman would be inside, probably making his terrible coffee and looking at maps. I was right. When I pushed open the door, the smell of burnt coffee hit me like a wall. "You're late," Bill said without looking up from the map spread across his desk. At 57, Bill had been a ranger here longer than I'd been alive. His face was weathered like old leather, and his gray hair stuck out from under his hat. "Saw something weird up on the ridge," I said, hanging up my jacket. "Tracks like I've never seen before," Bill grunted. "We've got bigger problems. This is the third group that's gone missing this month." That made me stop. Third? I only knew about the college kids from last week. There was another. Solo hiker, experienced guy. Found his backpack yesterday, but no sign of him. Bill finally looked up at me. His eyes were tired. "Something ain't right, Kit." A chill ran down my spine as I remembered those strange howls. "The Miller family, what's their story?" "Parents and 2 kids, 12 and 8. Been coming here every summer for years, so they know the trails. They were supposed to check in by radio yesterday at noon. Nothing." I poured myself some of Bill's awful coffee, needing the warmth more than the taste. "Who's on the search team?" "Dr. Reeves is already here. She was doing some wildlife study nearby. Peter Lockwood volunteered, and Garcia from the South Station is driving up." Diana Reeves was a wildlife biologist who'd been studying predator patterns in our region for months. Smart lady, but kind of intense. Peter Lockwood was search and rescue. Knew these mountains as well as I did, maybe better. He'd asked me out 3 times. I'd said no 3 times. Garcia was a good ranger, quiet but dependable. 4 of us isn't much for these mountains, I said. 5, Bill corrected. Jimmy Blackfoot called, says he wants to help. That surprised me. Jimmy was a Ute elder who rarely came up to the ranger station. He knew these mountains better than anyone, but lately he kept to himself. As if on cue, the door opened and Jimmy walked in. He must have been over 60, but he moved like a much younger man. His dark eyes landed on me immediately. "Catherine," he said with a slight nod. He never called me Kit like everyone else. "Jimmy," I replied. "Thanks for coming." He looked out the window at the strange blue moon. "Bad time to be in the mountains," he said quietly. "The skinwalkers walk when the blue moon rises." Bill sighed. "Jimmy, not the legends again. We've got real people missing." Jimmy just looked at him with those ancient eyes. "The legends are why they're missing." The door opened again, letting in a gust of cool air. Diana Reeves entered, followed by Peter Lockwood. Diana was tall and thin, with her blonde hair pulled back in a tight ponytail. Peter was solid and bearded, dressed in full search and rescue gear already. "Kit," Peter said with a smile that was a little too friendly. I nodded at him and turned to Bill. "What's the plan?" Bill pointed to the map. "We'll split into 2 teams. Kit, you take Dr. Reeves and Lockwood up the main trail to their last known location. Jimmy, Garcia, and I will circle around from the east. Radio check every hour. We move at first light." "We should go now," I said, thinking of that family in the dark. Bill shook his head. "Too dangerous at night. Whatever you saw up there is exactly why we wait. Mountain lions are more active at night, and with this weird wildlife behavior Dr. Reeves has been tracking." Diana perked up. "You noticed it too? I've recorded unusual predator movements all week. Bears active at midday, wolves hunting in larger packs. Could be the weather," Peter suggested. "Or maybe the eclipse is messing with them. Animals can sense that kind of thing." Jimmy said nothing, but his eyes never left the window and that strange moon. I wanted to argue more about leaving now, but Bill was right. Getting ourselves lost or hurt wouldn't help the Millers. "First light then," I agreed. We spent the next few hours preparing gear. Extra ammo for my rifle, first aid kits, Emergency blankets, 3 days of rations each. The whole time I couldn't shake the feeling that we were missing something important. Garcia arrived around midnight, and we all tried to get some sleep in the cots at the station. But each time I closed my eyes, I saw those strange tracks appearing and disappearing in the mud. I heard those howls that weren't quite wolf, not quite human. I must have dozed off eventually because Bill was shaking me awake before I knew it. Time was all he said. Outside, the sky was just turning gray. The moon had set, but its strange light seemed to linger in the air. As we gathered by the jeeps, I noticed the search dogs were acting weird, whining and backing away when Peter tried to load them into his truck. "What's wrong with them?" I asked. Peter frowned. "Never seen them like this, almost like they're scared." Jimmy watched the dogs, with knowing eyes. They sense what waits in the mountains. Bill ignored him. "Let's move out, stay on radio contact." We loaded up and headed out, my Jeep in the lead with Diana and Peter. The road was rough, and soon we had to continue on foot. The strange blue moon might have set, but as the sun rose, it didn't seem to chase away the shadows like it should. 3 hours of hiking brought us to the Millers' last campsite. What we found there made my blood run cold. The 2 tents were still there, but they were torn to shreds from the inside out like something had burst through them. There was no blood, which should have been a relief, but somehow made it worse. The family's belongings were arranged in a perfect circle in the center of camp. 4 pairs of shoes, 4 toothbrushes, 4 water bottles. "What the hell?" Peter whispered. Diana was already taking photos, her scientist's curiosity overriding her fear. "This isn't animal behavior," she said. "Not any animal I've studied." I pulled out my compass to mark our location for the others. The needle spun wildly, never settling on north. I tried my radio to call Bill static. Then, through the static, what sounded like a howl. Diana's equipment was malfunctioning too. Her wildlife tracker beeped erratically. "We're being watched," Peter said suddenly, his voice tight. I felt it too, eyes on us from every direction at once. I scanned the tree line but saw nothing. Yet the feeling remained, pressing down on us like a physical weight. "We should keep moving," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Follow the trail north. They might have fled that way." But as we gathered, our gear, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't the ones doing the hunting here. We were being hunted. We followed what was left of the Millers' trail until the sun started to set. With each step, the woods got quieter. No birds singing, no squirrels chattering, just our footsteps and breathing. "We need to make camp," Peter said finally. "We won't find anything in the dark." I wanted to argue, but he was right. The shadows were growing longer and the temperature was dropping fast. Way too fast for a summer evening. "There's a clearing about a quarter-mile ahead," I said. "We can set up there." We found the spot just as the last bit of sunlight disappeared. Peter got a fire going while Diana and I set up the tents. The flames seemed to create more shadows than light, making the trees around us dance in strange ways. "I'll take first watch," I offered. Not sure I could sleep anyway. We ate a quiet dinner of trail rations. Nobody talked much. The silence in the woods was getting to all of us. "I've been studying predators in these mountains for 3 years, Diana said suddenly. "I've never seen them act like this. It's like they're afraid of something." "Something bigger than them," Peter added, poking at the fire. I thought about those tracks I'd seen, appearing and disappearing like magic. "Whatever it is, we'll deal with it in the morning," I said. "You two should get some sleep." Diana nodded and headed to her tent. Peter stayed by the fire a moment longer. "Be careful, Kit," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Wake me if you hear anything strange." After they went to their tents, I sat alone by the fire, my rifle across my lap and my father's knife at my belt. The night was too quiet, too still. The fire crackled, and occasionally a log would shift, sending sparks into the air. But beyond our little circle of light, the forest seemed to be holding its breath. About 2 hours into my watch, Peter emerged from his tent. "Couldn't sleep," he said, sitting down across from me. "I'll take over if you want to rest." Something seemed off about him. His movements were stiffer than usual, and he wouldn't meet my eyes. "I'm fine," I said. "You should try to sleep." "The child is still alive," he said suddenly. I froze. "What did you say?" "The young one. Still alive. The others." He trailed off, staring into the fire. "Peter, how would you know that?" He looked up at me then, and I had to stop myself from gasping. His eyes caught the firelight in a way that human eyes shouldn't. Multiple colors reflected back at me, like an oil slick on water. "You should sleep, Catherine," he said, my full name sounding wrong in his mouth. "Long day tomorrow." I gripped my rifle tighter, trying to keep my breathing steady. "I think I'll stay up a bit longer." He stared at me for what felt like forever, then nodded and went back to his tent. I didn't sleep at all that night. Every time I looked toward Peter's tent, I could feel him watching me. As the first light of dawn broke through the trees, I woke Diana with a gentle shake. Her eyes flew open, alert immediately. "Something's wrong with Peter," I whispered. Before I could explain, we heard Peter's voice from outside. "Rise and shine, folks, coffee's on." Diana and I exchanged a look before stepping out of the tent. Peter was crouched by a small morning fire, looking completely normal, eyes and all. "Sleep well?" he asked cheerfully. "Like a rock," I lied. "Where's Garcia's tent?" We all turned to where Garcia's tent should have been. All that remained were his boots, placed neatly side by side as if waiting for him to step into them. "Garcia?" Diana called out. No answer. We searched the area but found no sign of him. No tracks leading away from his tent. No signs of struggle. It was like he'd simply vanished, leaving only his boots behind. "We need to radio Bill," I said, pulling out my radio. Still nothing but static and that weird howl-like sound buried in the white noise. "We should keep moving," Peter suggested. Maybe Garcia went ahead to scout. I didn't believe that for a second, but we packed up camp and continued on the trail. The day was bright and clear, but the warmth didn't reach inside me. I kept Peter in front of me at all times, watching his every move. Around midday, Diana grabbed my arm and pointed to a ridgeline about half a mile away. "Look," she whispered. Figures stood there, silhouetted against the sky. Tall, impossibly tall, standing on two legs but shaped all wrong. Even from this distance, I could tell they weren't human. As we watched, one dropped to all fours and loped along the ridge with unnatural speed. "What the hell are those?" Diana breathed. Peter just stared, his face unreadable. I raised my binoculars for a better look, but they were gone. Like they'd never been there at all. "We need to find the Millers and get out of these mountains," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. We continued on, the feeling of being watched growing stronger with each step. Diana collected samples along the way, strange tufts of fur caught on tree bark, weird tracks similar to what I'd seen before. "The DNA in these samples will be fascinating," she said, her scientist's curiosity temporarily overcoming her fear. "They don't match any known predator patterns." As we rounded a bend in the trail, I saw something that made me stop dead in my tracks. A massive rock face rose before us, gray stone streaked with white quartz. As I watched, something moved through it, not around it, through it. Like the rock was just air. It was shaped like a man but much taller, with a wolf-like head and long, wrong-looking limbs. It passed through the solid stone and was gone in seconds. "Did you see that?" I whispered. Diana nodded, her face pale. Peter said nothing, just stared at the spot where the creature had vanished. "We're not dealing with normal predators," I said, stating the obvious. "We need to find the Millers and get to safety." We pushed on, moving faster now. The forest seemed to close in around us, branches reaching like fingers, shadows moving when they shouldn't. That's when we heard it, a small frightened whimper coming from a hollow tree just off the trail. I approached slowly, rifle ready. "Hello?" I called softly. "Is someone there? We're here to help." A small face appeared in the hollow, a girl, maybe 8 years old, her eyes wide with terror. The younger Miller child. "They took them," she whispered. The people who became wolves took my mom and dad and brother. I knelt down to her level. It's okay now, we're going to get you out of here. My name's Kit. I'm a forest ranger. Emma, she said in a tiny voice. They said they'd come back for me when the moon turns red. I helped her out of the tree hollow. She was shaking, her clothes dirty and torn. When did this happen, Emma? Diana asked gently. Last night. We were sleeping. Then they came through the tent walls like ghosts. Emma's voice trembled. Dad tried to fight them. They carried everyone away. I ran and hid. I glanced at the sky. The sun was starting to set, and on the eastern horizon, I could see the blue moon beginning to rise. Already it had a reddish tint to its edges. The eclipse, Diana said. It's starting early. We need shelter, I said. Now. Peter pointed through the trees. There's an old cabin about half a mile that way. Forest Service emergency shelter. I picked up Emma, and we hurried through the darkening woods. The moon rose higher, its light growing redder by the minute. The shadows seemed to move around us, keeping pace, watching. We reached the cabin just as true darkness fell. It was small, one room with a wood stove, some bunks, and basic supplies. I barricaded the door as best I could while Diana comforted Emma. What about my mom and dad? Emma asked. And Jake? We'll find them, I promised, though I wasn't sure if I believed it myself. Outside, the moon cast everything in a blood-red light. And in that red glow, shapes moved among the trees. Tall, wrong-shaped shadows circling our cabin. The hunt had begun. The old cabin creaked and groaned as the wind picked up outside. Through the dirty windows, the world looked blood-red under the eclipse. I checked my rifle for the 10th time and made sure my father's knife was loose in its sheath. They can't get in, right? Emma whispered, huddled under a blanket Diana had found. We're safe in here, I told her, trying to sound more confident than I felt. Peter stood by one of the windows, staring out into the red darkness. He hadn't said much since we found Emma. Something about the way he stood, too still, like he was listening to something none of us could hear, made the hair on the back of my neck stand up. Emma, Diana said gently, can you tell us more about the people who took your family? Emma's small hands gripped the blanket tighter. They looked like people, but wrong. Too tall. Their faces were like wolves, but they walked on two legs. And their eyes, she shuddered. Their eyes had all the colors in them, just like Peter's eyes had looked in the firelight. Did they say anything? I asked, moving closer to Emma and further from Peter. She nodded. They talked without moving their mouths. In my head. A tear slipped down her dirty cheek. They said the pack needed new members. They said the moon was hungry. A howl cut through the night outside, closer than any of the others. It was answered by more howls surrounding the cabin. They're here, Peter said, his voice oddly flat. I checked the old service pistol Bill had given me before we left. It had been his father's. A silver-plated ceremonial thing that he'd insisted I take for luck. My rifle suddenly felt useless in my hands. Everyone away from the windows, I ordered. We huddled in the center of the cabin's single room. The howling grew louder, circling us. Then silence. The wood stove's fire cast dancing shadows on the walls. For a moment nothing happened. Then we heard it scratching at the walls, the ceiling, the floor, like claws testing for weakness. They're trying to find a way in, Diana whispered. The scratching stopped. Emma whimpered and pressed closer to Diana. Then I saw it. A hand pushing through the solid wood of the wall like it was pushing through water. Long fingers with black claws, fur covering the back of the hand. It reached in, followed by an arm, a shoulder. Diana screamed. I raised my rifle and fired. The bullet passed right through the creature and into the wall behind it. The thing didn't even flinch. It kept coming, its body sliding through the solid wall like a nightmare. In the red moonlight coming through the window, I could see it clearly now. 7 feet tall at least, with a wolf's head, on a too thin, too long human body. Its eyes shifted, colors as it looked at us, blue, green, yellow, red. "The bullets won't work," Peter said calmly. "Not unless they're silver." More of them were coming through now, through the walls, the floor, the ceiling. 5, 6, 7 of them, surrounding us. "The child comes with us," one of them said, but its mouth didn't move. The words just appeared in my head. "Like hell," I growled, stepping in front of Emma. The creatures moved closer. Diana pulled Emma behind her. I raised my rifle, knowing it was useless, but not knowing what else to do. "Stop," Peter said suddenly. "This isn't the plan." The creatures paused, their shifting eyes turning to Peter. "The child was promised," one of them said in our minds, "the woman ranger too." Peter turned to us, and this time there was no hiding the change in his eyes. They shifted colors just like the creatures. "I'm sorry, Kit," he said, but his voice didn't sound sorry at all. "Some of us have to join them to survive." "You're one of them," I whispered. He shook his head. "Not yet, but I will be. After tonight." He took a step toward me. "They've been watching you, Kit. They want you. Your strength, your skills." "Stay back," I warned, pointing my rifle at him. Peter smiled, but it wasn't his smile anymore. "Those bullets can't hurt me now." "Maybe not," came a gruff voice from behind me. "But this can." Bill Hoffman stood in the doorway, a shotgun in his hands. Behind him were Jimmy and 3 more rangers. "Bill!" I'd never been so happy to see anyone in my life. Peter snarled, a sound no human throat should make, and lunged at Bill. The shotgun roared, and Peter was thrown backward. The creatures hissed, the sound filling our heads. "Silver buckshot," Bill explained, pumping the shotgun. "Jimmy told me what we're dealing with. Get the girl out." Chaos erupted. The dogmen solidified to attack, becoming vulnerable. Bill's shotgun boomed again and again. The rangers fired, some of their bullets passing harmlessly through the creatures, others finding solid flesh when the dogmen had to materialize. Diana grabbed Emma and headed for the door. I followed, covering them with my rifle. "Use this." Jimmy appeared at my side, pressing something into my hand. It was a small box of bullets. "Silver tips. For your pistol." I quickly loaded Bill's silver-plated pistol with the special bullets. Dogman leaped at Diana. I fired. The silver bullet hit it square in the chest, and the creature let out a mind-splitting scream before collapsing. Diana and Emma made it outside. I turned to follow them and saw Dr. Reeves standing frozen in the doorway, staring past me in horror. I spun around to see Peter, no longer fully human, with his claws buried in Bill's chest. "No!" I screamed, raising the pistol, but I was too late. Peter ripped his claws free, and Bill collapsed to the floor, blood pooling beneath him. Peter turned to me, his face elongated, halfway between human and wolf. "This could have been easier. Kit," his voice rasped in my mind. I fired. The silver bullet grazed his shoulder, and he howled in pain. He lunged for me, but Jimmy appeared between us, throwing something that exploded in a cloud of herbs and powder. Peter recoiled, snarling. "Go!" Jimmy shouted at me. "Get to running water!" "They can't cross it during the eclipse." I backed toward the door, firing again at Peter. This time I hit him in the leg. He fell to one knee but kept coming. Bill moved on the floor, still alive somehow. His eyes found mine. "Run, Kit," he gasped. "I'll hold them here." Despite his wounds, Bill raised his shotgun and fired at the ceiling. Wood and debris rained down, blocking the doorway as the roof began to collapse. "Bill, no," I shouted. "Go!" His voice was weak but commanding, the voice that had guided me since I'd become a ranger. The cabin was coming down. Jimmy grabbed my arm and pulled me outside just as the roof caved in, burying Bill and the dogmen under wood and stone. Outside, Diana waited with Emma and one ranger, Jackson. The others were gone. "The river," I gasped. "We need to get to the river." 4 miles east, Jackson said. "If we run, we might make it before the eclipse ends." I looked back at the collapsed cabin. There was no sign of Bill or Jimmy. "We have to go," Diana urged, carrying Emma. "They're coming." From the ruins of the cabin, howls rose into the blood-red night. They were coming for us. The hunt wasn't over. It had just begun. We ran through the forest, the red moonlight making everything look like it was covered in blood. I led the way, Diana behind me with Emma in her arms and Jackson bringing up the rear with his rifle ready. 4 miles to the river, I panted. We can make it. The howls followed us, sometimes fading, sometimes getting closer. They were playing with us, I realized, herding us like sheep. They're circling around, Jackson warned, his voice tight with fear, trying to cut us off. I glanced at my watch. The eclipse would last another hour, maybe less. We had to reach the river before it ended. This way, I said, veering off the main trail. It's rougher terrain, but it might slow them down. We pushed through thick underbrush, branches scratching, at our faces and hands. Emma was being so brave, not making a sound even though I knew she must be terrified. "Kit," Diana gasped after about 20 minutes of hard running. "I need to rest. Just for a minute." She was struggling with Emma's weight. Jackson looked exhausted too, his face slick with sweat despite the cool night air. 1 minute, I agreed. Then we keep moving. We huddled behind a fallen tree. I checked the silver pistol. 3 bullets left. Not nearly enough. "What happens when we reach the river?" Diana whispered. "Jimmy said they can't cross running water during the eclipse," I explained. "If we can get across, we should be safe until it ends." "And after it ends?" Jackson asked. I had no answer for that. A twig snapped in the darkness and we all froze. Something was moving toward us, something big. "Don't move," I breathed. A shape emerged from between the trees, walking on 2 legs, but moving all wrong. It sniffed the air, its wolf-like head turning from side to side. "It can't see us," Diana whispered, barely audible. The creature's head snapped in our direction. I could feel its thoughts pushing into my mind, cold and alien. "I can smell your fear." Jackson raised his rifle, but I put my hand on it, pushing it down gently. The silver bullets were our only effective weapons, and I only had 3 left. The dogman took another step toward us, and I made a split-second decision. "Run for the river," I whispered to Diana and Jackson. "I'll distract it." "Kit, no," Diana started. "Take Emma and go. Now." Before they could argue, I stood up and shouted, "Hey, over here!" The creature's multicolored eyes locked onto me. Fired once, hitting it in the shoulder. It howled in pain, the sound piercing my skull. I turned and ran in the opposite direction from Diana and the others. I could hear the creature crashing through the underbrush behind me. Good. Follow me, not them. I ran harder than I'd ever run, dodging between trees, leaping over fallen logs. The thing behind me was fast, but I knew these woods. I led it on, a wild chase, zigging and zagging, using every trick I knew. When I was sure I'd led it far enough away from the others, I doubled back, heading east toward the river again. My lungs burned, and my legs felt like lead, but I kept going. The howls were all around me now. More of them had joined the hunt. I could feel their excitement in my head, their hunger. I emerged from the trees onto a rocky outcrop and stopped dead. 3 dogmen stood before me, their long limbs and wolf heads silhouetted against the red moon. "Nowhere to run, Ranger," one of them pushed into my mind. I backed up slowly, the silver pistol raised. "Stay back," I warned. They advanced, spreading out to surround me. I glanced behind me, a steep drop at least 30 feet down to a ravine below. "No escape that way." 2 bullets, the lead dogman said in my head. 3 of us. I had to make them count. I aimed carefully and fired at the one on the left. The barred silver bullet found its mark, and the creature collapsed with a mental scream that made me stagger. The other 2 rushed me. I fired my last bullet, catching one in the chest. It fell, but the third kept coming. I had no choice. I threw myself off the edge of the outcrop. I hit the slope hard, rolling and sliding down the steep incline. Rocks and branches tore at my clothes and skin. I finally came to a stop at the bottom, battered and bruised but alive. Above me, the remaining dogman howled in frustration. It started to make its way down the slope, more carefully than I had. I forced myself to my feet, ignoring the pain. I still had my father's knife, Not much against a 7-foot monster, but it was all I had left. I ran along the ravine, following it downward. All streams eventually led to the river. I just had to get there before the dogman caught me. The ravine widened, and I could hear water ahead. The blessed sound of the river. I pushed myself harder, ignoring the stitch in my side and the blood running down my face from a cut on my forehead. The trees thinned, and suddenly I was on the riverbank. The water rushed by, black under the red moon. On the opposite bank, I could see figures. Diana, Emma, and Jackson. They'd made it. Kit! Diana shouted, waving frantically. Hurry! I started toward the water, but a weight hit me from behind, driving me to the ground. The dogman had caught up. Its hot breath stank in my nostrils as it pinned me down. You led us a good chase, Ranger. Its thoughts invaded my mind. The pack will be stronger with you. Its claws dug into my shoulders, and I cried out in pain. With every ounce of strength I had left, I rolled, trying to throw it off. We grappled on the riverbank, its inhuman strength nearly overwhelming me. Kit! Jackson was in the water now, trying to reach me. Hold on! The dogman's jaws snapped, near my throat. I managed to get one hand free and reached for my father's knife. My fingers closed around the handle. With a desperate thrust, I drove the knife into the creature's side. It wasn't silver, but it was enough to make the monster rear back in pain. I scrambled away toward the river. The dogman recovered quickly and lunged for me again, but Jackson was there, stepping between us with his rifle raised like a club. Run, Kit! He shouted. The dogman swatted Jackson aside like he was nothing. I heard a sickening crack as he hit a boulder by the riverbank. He didn't get up. Jackson! I screamed. The dogman turned its attention back to me. Behind it, more shapes were emerging from the trees, the rest of the pack. Among them was a larger one, at least 8 feet tall. The alpha. I backed into the water, feeling the current tug at my legs. The dogman followed, stepping into the shallows. The water doesn't stop us now, it thought at me. The eclipse is ending. I looked up. The moon was indeed changing, the red glow fading as the eclipse began to end. The alpha approached the water's edge, its multicolored eyes fixed on me. The other dogmen parted to let it through. You killed many of my pack. Its thoughts were colder, more powerful than the others. Now you will join us or die. I stood in the water, knife in hand, knowing it wasn't enough. The alpha stepped into the river, the water barely reaching its knees. Kit, Diana called from the far bank. The pistol. Use the pistol. What was she talking about? I had no bullets left. Then I remembered Bill's silver-plated pistol. Even without bullets, the silver itself might hurt them. I pulled the empty gun from my belt and pointed it at the alpha. It laughed in my mind. No more silver bullets, Ranger. No, I admitted. But the gun itself is silver. I lunged forward, driving the silver-plated pistol barrel into the alpha's chest like a knife. The creature howled, a sound that split the night and my skull at the same time. It clawed at me, ripping through my jacket and into the flesh beneath. Pain exploded across my ribs, but I pushed harder, twisting the silver barrel deeper. The alpha thrashed, its mental screams deafening me. The water around us turned dark with its blood. With the last of my strength, I pulled my father's knife and drove it into the alpha's throat, right where it joined the too long body. The alpha collapsed, falling backward into the river. Its body began to dissolve like mist in the morning sun. The other dogmen howled in rage and grief, their thoughts a chaotic storm in my head. But they hesitated at the water's edge, watching as their leader disappeared beneath the surface. I staggered deeper into the river, the current threatening to pull me under. My vision was going dark around the edges. I'd lost too much blood. Kit! Diana was in the water now, reaching for me. Hold on! She grabbed my arm just as my legs gave out. Together we struggled to the far bank where Emma waited, her eyes wide with terror. Behind us, the dogmen paced at the river's edge. Without their alpha, they seemed unsure, confused. The moon above had lost its red glow completely now. The eclipse was over. They're retreating, Diana whispered. It was true. The dogmen were melting back into the forest, their howls fading into the night. I collapsed on the riverbank, pain washing over me in waves. Diana knelt beside me, trying to stop the bleeding from the gashes in my side. "We made it," I gasped. "We're going to be okay." But as darkness claimed me, I wasn't sure if that was true at all. I woke up to the steady beep of hospital machines and the smell of antiseptic. For a moment, I couldn't remember where I was or how I'd gotten there. Then it all came flooding back. The dogmen, the chase, the fight in the river. I tried to sit up and gasped as pain shot through my side. "Easy there," a familiar voice said. "Those stitches are still fresh." Jimmy Blackfoot sat in a chair beside my bed, looking tired but alive. I couldn't believe it. "Jimmy? How did you... I thought you were in the cabin when it collapsed." He smiled, slightly. "I know ways through the mountains that even those creatures don't. I got out just before the roof came down." "Bill?" I asked, though I already knew the answer. Jimmy shook his head slowly. "He saved us all, gave us the time we needed to escape." I swallowed hard, fighting back tears. Bill had been more than my boss. He'd been my mentor, the closest thing to a father I'd had since my own dad died. "What about Diana and Emma?" "The doctor is fine. A few scratches, nothing serious. The child is with social services. No sign of her family." Jimmy's eyes were sad. "I don't think we'll find them." "And Jackson?" Jimmy was quiet for a moment. "He didn't make it. Broken neck when he hit that rock." I closed my eyes, feeling the weight of it all. So many lost. And for what? "How did I get here?" I asked finally. "Helicopter rescue at dawn. Diana kept you alive until they reached you. You lost a lot of blood." I looked down at my bandaged side. "The creatures?" "Gone. For now." Jimmy leaned forward. "But they'll be back. They always come back." A knock at the door interrupted us. A man in a dark suit entered, his face serious beneath salt and pepper hair. "Ranger Mendoza," he said with a nod. "Good to see you awake. I'm Agent Wilson, Department of Fish and Wildlife." I'd never heard of any Agent Wilson, and something about his badge didn't look quite right. "What happened up there, Ranger?" he asked, pulling out a notebook. "Your report mentioned a rogue wolf pack?" I glanced at Jimmy, who gave me the slightest shake of his head. "That's right," I said carefully. "Unusually aggressive wolves, possibly rabid." Agent Wilson wrote something down. "And the damage to the cabin? The injuries to your team?" "The cabin collapsed during the storm. We were trapped inside with the wolves." He nodded as if this made perfect sense. "And Ranger Lockwood? Any idea what happened to him?" "Peter. I'd almost forgotten about him in the chaos." "Attacked by the wolves," I said. "We couldn't find his body." Agent Wilson closed his notebook. "Well, I think that covers everything. We'll handle the official report from here." "Wait," I said as he turned to leave. "What about the Miller family? Are you looking for them?" "That case has been closed, Ranger. I suggest you focus on your recovery." After he left, Jimmy leaned close. "They know," he whispered. "They've always known. Every 30 years, they come in afterward and clean up the mess. Write their reports, hide the truth." "Why?" I asked. "Why not warn people? Keep them out of the mountains during the eclipse?" "Because some things are too frightening for people to accept," Jimmy said simply. "Better to call it a rogue wolf, a bear attack, a tragic accident." I thought about Emma, alone now with a story no one would ever believe. "I'm being transferred," I said, remembering what the doctors had told me earlier. "Desk duty in Denver." Jimmy nodded. "They'll want you where they can keep an eye on you. Make sure you stick to the official story." I stared out the window at the mountains in the distance. They looked so peaceful now, bathed in normal sunlight. It was hard to believe the nightmare we'd lived through. "Get some rest," Jimmy said, standing. "I'll check on you tomorrow." After he left, I lay back, my mind racing despite the pain medication, flowing through my IV. Something wasn't right. Something was missing. 3 days later, I was discharged from the hospital. My apartment felt strange after everything that had happened. I moved around slowly, careful of my bandaged side, trying to settle back into normal life. There was a knock at my door. When I opened it, a young ranger stood there looking uncomfortable. "Ranger Mendoza? I'm supposed to drop these off. From Ranger Hoffman's personal effects." He handed me a cardboard box and hurried away before I could ask any questions. I set the box on my kitchen table and opened it carefully. Inside were Bill's personal items, his watch, his ranger pins, a few photographs, and at the bottom a sealed envelope with my name on it. With shaking hands, I opened it. Inside was a folded piece of paper and an old photograph, faded and yellowed, with age. The photograph showed a group of men standing in front of a cabin, the same cabin we'd taken shelter in. They wore old-fashioned clothes like from the early 1900s, and behind them, half hidden in the trees, were shapes, tall, wrong-looking shapes with wolf-like heads. I turned the photo over. On the back was written, "Eagle Peak, Blue Moon Eclipse, 1895. The note from Bill was brief. "Kit, if you're reading this, then you've seen them and lived. I knew this day would come. Just like it came for my grandfather in 1965 and his father in 1935. Every 30 years when the blue moon eclipse comes, they can be stopped, but not forever. The pack always returns. Silver hurts them but doesn't end them. The only way to truly finish this is to find their origin. Look in the archives for the Ute shaman rituals of 1865. That's where it all began. Be ready for 2054. They'll be hungry again. Bill." I stared at the note for a long time, then at the old photograph, 30 years. That's how long I had to prepare to find answers. I looked out my window at the mountains, beautiful and deadly. Somewhere out there, the pack was waiting, healing. Somewhere out there were the answers Bill wanted me to find. I touched the bandages, on my side, feeling the scars that would always remind me of what happened at Eagle Peak, of what waited in those mountains under the blood-red moon. I picked up my father's knife from the table, the blade cleaned and polished. I'd survived when others hadn't. I owed it to them, to Bill, to Jackson, to the Miller family, to be ready when the dogmen returned. 30 years wasn't that long, not when you were preparing for war. Outside my window, a wolf howled in the distant mountains. A normal wolf, I told myself. But I still reached for the knife, just in case. Some horrors you never forget. Some hunts never truly end. And somewhere in the mountains, under the normal moon, I knew they were watching, waiting, planning. For the next eclipse, I would be ready. The cold has a voice. I've known this since I was a boy, but here in Glacier National Park it sings. My name is Michael Oakes, and I've spent most of my life learning the language of winter. 37 years old, and the frost has already claimed parts of me. My ears sting with old frostbite, and silver streaks my temples like the first dusting of snow on mountain peaks. The scars on my forearms tell stories I rarely share. This morning started like any other patrol, except the thermometer outside my cabin read -42. That's 30 degrees colder than normal, even for January in Montana. I pulled on my heavy parka, strapped on my snowshoes, and stepped into a world transformed by impossible cold. "Record lows again," I muttered into my radio. "Heading out for the North Ridge Patrol." "Copy that, Oakes," Beth Thornton's voice crackled back. Something about her voice always warmed me, even on days like this. "Stay safe out there." The sunrise painted the glaciers in shades of pink and gold, so beautiful it almost hurt to look. But beauty in these mountains often hides danger. My breath froze instantly, creating a cloud of ice crystals that sparkled in the morning light. Something felt wrong today, a heaviness in the air that had nothing to do with the cold. About 2 miles in, I spotted the first strange ice formation. It looked like a hand reaching up from the snow, fingers stretching toward the sky. Not just one, dozens of them sprouting from tree trunks like frozen fungi. I'd seen some weird ice sculptures formed by wind and temperature, but nothing like this. I took photos, trying to ignore the creeping feeling along my spine. "That's new," I said to myself. touching one gently. The ice was so cold it burned my fingertip through my glove. As I continued my hike, I noticed something else strange. The trails were empty of animal tracks. No moose, no wolves, not even snowshoe hares. These animals thrive in cold weather. Where had they gone? Then came the lights. The sky erupted in swirling ribbons of green and blue, an aurora borealis dancing across the morning sky. Beautiful, breathtaking, and completely impossible. We're too far south for northern lights, and they don't appear during daylight. Yet there they were, pulsing above me like ghostly fingers. I stopped and stared, a knot forming in my stomach. The same knot I'd felt years ago in the Himalayas, the day before everything went wrong, the day before I lost James. I shook my head, trying to clear away old memories. Just strange weather patterns, I told myself. Climate change doing weird things, nothing more. But my hand drifted to the bone amulet hanging around my neck. Mammoth ivory charm given to me by Margaret Running Elk, a Blackfeet elder who knew more about these mountains than any scientist. Some cold is alive, she told me when she pressed it into my palm. This will help you see it coming. The amulet felt unusually warm against my chest. I turned back toward the ranger station earlier than planned. Something was stirring in these mountains, something old and patient and cold. The feeling followed me all the way back, like eyes watching from every ice-covered tree. "You're back early," Beth said when I walked in, stamping snow from my boots. Her brown eyes narrowed with concern. "Everything okay?" Before I could answer, the emergency radio crackled to life. A family of 4, missing after skiing off trail near Thompson Glacier. My stomach dropped as the coordinates came through, right where I'd seen those ice hands reaching up from the snow. "We need to go now," I said, already reaching for my rescue pack. The dread I'd been fighting all morning solidified into certainty. Whatever was happening in these mountains had just claimed its first victims, and I knew somehow this was only the beginning. Beth and I loaded up the snowmobiles with rescue gear while Dr. Victor Kaminsky, our visiting hypothermia researcher, insisted on joining us. Paul Decker, the youngest ranger on our team, grabbed his high-tech GPS and emergency beacon. Family of 4, I briefed them as engines roared to life. Parents and 2 kids ages 10 and 12. They didn't return to their cabin last night. "With these temperatures, they won't last long," Kaminsky said, his breath clouding, "even with proper gear." We sped across the snow-covered landscape, the wind biting at any exposed skin. The missing family had left a note about exploring near Thompson Glacier, a beautiful but dangerous area, especially in these conditions. 2 hours later, we found their campsite. "Hello, park rangers," Beth called out, her voice swallowed by the vast whiteness. The small blue tent was still standing, but something was wrong. Ice crystals had formed inside, coating the sleeping bags and backpacks, not the normal kind of frost you'd expect. These were shaped like tiny hands reaching out from the fabric. "This doesn't make sense," Decker said, frowning at his thermometer. "It's actually warmer in here than outside. How did it freeze like this?" I touched one of the ice formations, feeling that same burn through my gloves. The amulet against my chest pulsed with warmth. "Tracks lead this way," Beth called from outside. We followed the footprints through a stand of pines and into a clearing. That's where we found the father. He was standing upright in the snow, not lying down like most hypothermia victims who curl up trying to stay warm. Standing. His eyes were open wide, his mouth frozen in a silent scream. His body was completely solid, not just cold, but turned to ice all the way through. "That's impossible," Kaminsky whispered, reaching out to touch the man's arm. "Hypothermia doesn't work like this. The body freezes from the outside in." "Don't touch him," I said sharply. Something about the man's eyes made my blood run cold. I'd seen this before, high in the Himalayas. A climber, frozen solid but somehow still standing, looking terrified of something none of us could see. "We need to find the rest of the family," Beth said, her voice tight with worry. As we spread out to search, I noticed the temperature dropping rapidly. My thermometer showed a 15-degree drop in just minutes as we approached a deep crack in the glacier. "Everyone stay together," I ordered, fighting the memories trying to surface in my mind, "and watch for unusual ice formations." "It's just ice, Oaks," Decker said with a nervous laugh. "What's gotten into you?" I didn't answer. How could I explain that the cold here felt alive somehow? That it seemed to be watching us, waiting for something? We found the mother and children an hour later in a small cave formed by fallen trees and snow. They were huddled together, but unlike the father, they were just suffering from normal hypothermia. Still alive. Barely. "We need to get them back now," Beth said, already wrapping them in emergency blankets. As we worked to save the family, I kept scanning our surroundings. Something didn't add up. Why was the father frozen solid while the others weren't? Why was he standing alone in that clearing? Back at the station, after the family was evacuated by helicopter to the hospital in Kalispell, I pulled out the photos I'd taken of those strange ice hands. They seemed to be pointing toward the glacier crevasse where the temperature had dropped, so suddenly. "What you got there?" Beth asked, bringing me a cup of coffee. "Something's wrong out there, Beth," I said quietly. "I've seen it before." "Seen what before?" Before I could answer, Decker burst into the room. "2 more hikers just reported missing," he said, face pale. "And you need to see this." He held up his tablet showing photos sent from another ranger station. More bodies frozen just like the father, standing upright with faces twisted in terror. But what made my stomach drop was what stood behind them. Perfect ice sculptures of people, detailed down to the last eyelash. Sculptures that hadn't been there the day before. The amulet burned against my skin as a memory surfaced. James's last words to me in that Himalayan snowstorm. "It's not the cold that kills you, Mike. It's what lives in the cold." "We need to go back out there," I said, grabbing my gear. Those hikers could still be alive. Outside, the sky had turned an ugly purple-gray, heavy with snow. The wind whipped around us, carrying ice crystals that stung like tiny needles against any exposed skin. "Storm's coming in fast," Beth warned, checking the weather radar on her tablet. "Forecast says it'll be the worst blizzard in 20 years. We took the snowmobiles back to the area where the family had been found. Dr. Kaminsky insisted on joining us, carrying special equipment to study the frozen bodies. Decker stayed behind to coordinate with other ranger stations. This time we found 3 bodies, all frozen solid, all standing upright. "I've never seen anything like this," Kaminsky muttered, scraping samples from one victim's arm. "The cellular structure is completely different from normal freezing patterns. It's like they froze from the inside out." "That's not possible," Beth said. "Neither are ice sculptures that appear overnight," I reminded her. And there they were, perfect ice copies of what I assumed were the missing hikers, so detailed you could see the wrinkles in their clothing, the strands of hair. They stood in a half circle facing the glacier, like they were watching something. "Could someone be making these?" Beth asked, her breath forming clouds in the bitter air. "Some kind of sick joke?" "No one could create this level of detail," Kaminsky said, examining one of the sculptures. "And the molecular structure of this ice is unusual, dense, almost crystalline." While they talked, I moved closer to the glacier crevasse. The temperature dropped with each step, my thermometer showing -60 now. The bone amulet felt like it was burning a hole through my chest. That's when I saw it, just for a second. A tall, transparent figure moving within the ice of the glacier wall. No features except hollow spaces where eyes should be. It vanished, so quickly I couldn't be sure it was real. "We need to go. Now," I said, backing away. "But the hikers," Beth started. "They're already gone. We'll come back with more people after the storm." Back at the ranger station, Decker was on the radio with another outpost. His face was grim when he turned to us. 2 more bodies found near East Glacier. Same condition, frozen standing up, and reports of ice sculptures there too. "This doesn't make any sense," Beth said, spreading a map on the table. "I've marked where all the bodies have been found. There's a pattern here." She was right. The locations formed a rough circle around our station, like something was closing in on us. I couldn't hide what I knew anymore. I need to make a call, I said, heading for the emergency radio. The regular lines won't work with this storm coming in. I called Margaret Running Elk at the Blackfeet Reservation. Even with the static and the howling wind outside, her voice came through clear and strong. "The cold that walks is awake again," she said before I could even explain why I was calling. "I've felt it for days." "What is it?" I asked, gripping the radio tightly. The old ones called it Pimi, the cold maker. It sleeps in the ice for 40 winters, then hunts for one. The stars are aligned now just as they were 40 years ago. How do we stop it? Static filled the line. The storm was getting worse. Copper disrupts its power. The ancient ones used copper spears. Find me when the storm passes. I'll tell you more. The radio went dead. Outside, the wind screamed like a living thing, and snow fell so thick I couldn't see past the windows. That night, none of us slept well. The temperature in the station kept dropping despite the heaters running full blast. By morning, ice had formed on the inside of the windows, making strange patterns that looked like faces if you stared too long. "Main power's out," Decker announced, coming in from checking the generator. "Backup won't last more than a day in this cold." "Any chance of evacuation?" Beth asked. "No way. We're completely snowed in. The pass is blocked by an avalanche, and no helicopter could fly in this storm." That's when we heard it, a sound like ice cracking coming from the storage room. We all froze, listening. "Probably just the building settling in the cold," Kaminsky suggested, but I knew better. I grabbed a flashlight and headed toward the sound. "Michael, wait," Beth called, following me. The storage room door was covered in a thin layer of frost despite being inside. I pushed it open slowly, the hinges creaking in the cold. What we saw inside made Beth gasp. The ice sculptures we'd photographed out on the glacier, exact replicas of the hikers, were standing in our storage room. Sculptures that couldn't possibly be there. Sculptures that nobody had brought inside. And as we watched in horror, one of them slowly turned its head to look at us. I slammed the storage room door shut and dragged a heavy desk in front of it. "What the hell was that?" Beth whispered, her face pale. "Everyone to the main room. Now," I ordered, trying to keep my voice steady. We gathered around the fireplace where Decker had built up the flames as high as possible. The whole station creaked and groaned as the storm battered it from outside. "Those ice sculptures can't be in there," Kaminsky said, pacing. "It's physically impossible. We left them at the glacier." "We need to face facts," I said. "Something is hunting in these mountains. Something that isn't natural." "That's ridiculous," Kaminsky scoffed, but his eyes darted nervously toward the hallway where another cracking sound echoed. "Is it? How do you explain bodies frozen from the inside out? Ice sculptures that move? The animals fleeing the park?" I countered. Beth placed a hand on my arm. "Michael, what do you know that you're not telling us?" I took a deep breath. I hadn't told anyone the full story of what happened in the Himalayas. Not even Beth, despite how close we'd grown over the past year. 8 years ago, I was leading a climbing expedition in the Himalayas. There was a storm. Worse than anyone had predicted. We took shelter in a cave. I paused, the memories flooding back. My climbing partner, James, went to check the weather. When he didn't come back, I found him standing in the snow, frozen solid, just like the bodies we found today. "That doesn't prove anything supernatural," Kaminsky said. "I'm not finished." I continued. "That night I saw something moving through the blizzard. Something tall and transparent, like it was made of ice. The next morning, 3 more climbers were found frozen, and there were sculptures, ice copies of them." The room fell silent except for the howling wind outside. "Why didn't you ever tell me this?" Beth asked quietly. "Would you have believed me?" I spent 3 years in a Tibetan monastery after that, trying to make sense of what I saw. The monks there knew about the entity. They called it the Cold One, a spirit that feeds on warmth and life. As if on cue, the lights flickered and went out completely. The backup generator had failed. "Check for breath," I said suddenly. "What?" Decker asked. "Everyone breathe out. Look for condensation." We all exhaled, watching our breath fog in the cold air, all except Decker. No matter how hard he breathed, no cloud formed. "Paul," Beth whispered. I lunged across the room, grabbing a burning log from the fire and thrusting it toward Decker. His skin didn't redden from the heat. He didn't flinch or back away. "Where's the real Decker?" I demanded. The thing that looked like... Decker smiled, an expression that didn't reach its eyes. "Clever," it said in a voice that sounded like cracking ice. "He's been cooling down in the shed since yesterday." We ran to the storage shed behind the station. The real Decker was there, frozen solid like the others, his face locked in an expression of surprise and horror. "It's been among us for a day," I said, feeling sick. "Watching us, learning." Back inside, the fake Decker was gone. In its place was a puddle of water that was rapidly refreezing into crystalline patterns across the floor. "We're not safe here," Beth said. "That thing can imitate any of us." The copper, I remembered suddenly. Margaret said copper disrupts its power. I rolled up my sleeve, revealing the ritual scars on my forearm, thin lines where copper wire had been inserted under my skin by the monks in Tibet. Protection, they'd said, if I ever encountered the entity again. "We need to find anything made of copper," I told them. "Wiring, pipes, old pennies, anything." As we searched the station, the temperature kept dropping. Frost formed on every surface. The fire in the hearth struggled to stay lit. "There's copper wiring in the radio equipment," Beth called from the communications room. "And pipes under the sink," Kaminsky added. We worked quickly, tearing apart equipment and pulling out copper components. I fashioned crude spears by attaching copper wire to broom handles. Just as we finished, a new sound cut through the howling storm. A high-pitched keening, like wind through an ice cave. It was coming from everywhere and nowhere at once. "It's looking for a way in," I said. We huddled in the center of the main room, backs to each other, copper weapons ready. The windows frosted over completely, blocking our view of the outside world. The fire died down to embers despite our efforts to keep it going. In the dim light, I saw Beth's breath forming clouds, Kaminsky's too. My own breath was visible. We were still human. For now. "I should check the thermometer," Kaminsky said, moving toward the hallway. "Don't go alone," I warned, but he waved me off. "It's just around the corner. I'll be right back." Heard his footsteps recede, then a sudden crash and silence. "Victor?" Beth called. No answer. I gripped my copper spear tighter. "Don't move," I whispered. The silence stretched for what felt like hours. Then Kaminsky returned, smiling too widely. "Temperature's still dropping," he reported cheerfully. "Fascinating data for my research." I looked at his mouth as he spoke. No breath clouded the air. I kept my eyes on the thing that wasn't Kaminsky, trying not to let on that I knew. Beth must have noticed too. I felt her tense beside me. "Victor, catch," I said suddenly, tossing him a copper pipe. The fake Kaminsky flinched away from it, hands recoiling as the pipe clattered to the floor. "You're not Kaminsky," I said, raising my makeshift copper spear. The thing wearing Kaminsky's face tilted its head, studying us with empty eyes. When it smiled, its teeth looked like tiny icicles. "The real one was so curious," it said in that horrible cracking voice. "He wanted to understand how I work. Now he does." Beth lunged forward with her copper weapon. The fake Kaminsky moved with impossible speed, its arm stretching like flowing water to grab her wrist. Where it touched her, frost immediately spread across her skin. Beth screamed in pain. I swung my copper spear, slashing through the creature's arm. It made a sound like shattering glass, and the arm dissolved into a shower of ice crystals. Beth fell back, cradling her frost-covered wrist. The thing that wasn't Kaminsky backed away, its shape melting and reforming. "Copper," it hissed. "The old weapons, I remember." It flowed toward the door like water running uphill and disappeared into the storm. "Are you okay?" I asked Beth, examining her wrist. The skin was blue with frostbite where the creature had touched her. "It burns," she gasped, "like dry ice." I wrapped her wrist in warm cloths and helped her to the fireplace where we managed to rekindle a small flame. "We need to find the real Kaminsky," I said. We searched carefully, copper weapons ready, keeping each other in sight at all times. We found him in his bedroom, frozen solid like the others, his hand outstretched toward his research notes. Knew what was happening, Beth said softly, looking at the papers scattered across the floor. Look at this. Kaminsky had been taking notes on the ice samples. His last entry read, "Molecular structure unlike anything on Earth. Behaves more like living tissue than frozen water. Can it be communicating somehow?" "We need to get out of here," I said. "Find Margaret running elk. She knows more about this thing than anyone." "How? We're completely snowed in," I thought for a moment. "The maintenance tunnels, they run under the station to the vehicle garage. If we can reach the snowmobiles—" "It's suicide to go out in that storm," Beth argued. "It's suicide to stay." "Here," I countered. "That thing is hunting us one by one." We gathered what supplies we could. Emergency rations, first aid kit, extra copper wiring we found in the electrical panels. Beth's wrist was getting worse, the frostbite spreading slowly up her arm. The maintenance tunnel was narrow and pitch black. We crawled through it with only my flashlight leading the way, the beam cutting through darkness thick as tar. Every few feet I checked behind us, terrified of seeing that thing following. "Almost there," I whispered, as we approached the door, to the garage. Then we heard it, that sound of cracking ice coming from somewhere ahead of us. "It knows where we're going," Beth said. "There's another way," I replied. "The old ventilation shaft. It comes out near the ridge." We backtracked and found the rusted grate covering the ventilation shaft. It was barely big enough for us to squeeze through, and it would take us outside directly into the storm. But we had no choice. The wind hit us like a physical blow when we emerged. Snow whipped around us in a blinding curtain, and the cold cut through our clothes like knives. I checked my thermometer, 68 below zero. "This way," I shouted over the wind, pointing toward a stand of pine trees that would offer some shelter. We trudged through snow up to our waists, each step a battle. Beth stumbled, her frostbitten arm hanging useless at her side. "I can't feel my legs," she gasped. "Keep moving," I urged, supporting her weight. "Don't stop." Through the swirling snow, I could make out the dark shapes of the trees ahead. Just 100 more yards. 50. 20. Then I saw it. A tall, translucent figure standing between us and the trees. The storm seemed to flow around it, snow and ice bending to its will. It was taller now, maybe 12 feet high, with long arms that ended in crystalline fingers. "Behind me," I ordered Beth, holding up my copper spear. The entity moved toward us, ice crackling with each step. Where it walked, the snow froze solid, forming a glassy path. "Why are you hunting us?" I shouted at it. It paused, those empty eye sockets fixed on me. When it spoke, its voice was like an avalanche in the distance. "Hunger," it said simply. "Warmth, life." It reached out one long arm. I slashed at it with my copper weapon, and it recoiled. "You remember me," I said, suddenly understanding. "From the Himalayas, you've been hunting me. Your warmth is different," it replied. "Stronger. I followed your trail across the world. So much warmth to take." I felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold. This thing had tracked me from Tibet to Montana, had waited for the right moment to awaken. "Run for the trees," I told Beth. "I'll hold it off." "I'm not leaving you," she insisted. The creature lunged forward suddenly, moving faster than I thought possible. I swung my copper spear, catching it across what passed for its chest. It shrieked, a sound like wind through ice caves, and backed away. Beth threw her copper wiring at it like a net. Where the copper touched, the creature's icy body seemed to melt and reform more slowly. "It's working," she cried. But then the entity raised its arms and the storm responded. Snow swirled around us in a tightening circle, cutting off any escape. The temperature plummeted further. My eyelashes froze together. Every breath was like inhaling glass. As the wall of snow closed in, I saw more shapes forming within it, ice sculptures coming to life. The hikers, Decker, Kaminsky, all moving toward us with jerky puppet-like motions. "We're surrounded," Beth whispered, her lips blue with cold. I clutched my amulet, feeling its warmth against my palm, the last warmth in this frozen hell. "There's one place it can't follow," I said. an idea forming. The thermal vents in the canyon half a mile east. We'll never make it through this storm, or we have to try. I grabbed her good hand, and together we plunged into the whiteout, running for our lives as the ice entity and its frozen army pursued us through the endless snow. Running through knee-deep snow is like trying to sprint through quicksand. Each step was a battle, each breath painful in the frozen air. The wind screamed around us, throwing ice crystals that cut like tiny knives against any exposed skin. "I can see them," Beth gasped, looking back over her shoulder. I didn't need to look. I could feel them behind us. The ice entity and its army of frozen puppets moving through the storm like it was their element. Which it was. "Don't look back," I panted. "Just keep moving." The canyon was just ahead, a dark slash in the white landscape. Deep within it lay the thermal vents, hot springs that released steam even in the coldest weather. Our only hope. Beth stumbled and fell, disappearing momentarily in a puff of snow. I hauled her back to her feet, noticing with horror that the frostbite had spread up her arm to her shoulder. "I can't feel anything on my right side," she said, her words slurring slightly. "We're almost there," I promised, though I wasn't sure. We'd make it. The cold was getting to me too, my thoughts becoming sluggish, my movements clumsy. The edge of the canyon loomed suddenly before us, a 20-foot drop to the rocks below. In summer, there was a trail leading down. Now there was only a sheer wall of ice. "We'll have to climb down," I said, already searching for handholds in the frozen surface. "I can't climb," Beth said, holding up her useless arm. "Not like this." Behind us, the ice puppets were getting closer, their movements becoming smoother as they neared. The entity itself hung back, directing its army. I made a quick decision. "I'll go down first, then help you." There's no time. She was right. The first of the ice creatures, the one that had been Decker, was only 50 yards away now. I looked around desperately and spotted a fallen pine tree partially buried in the snow nearby. With Beth's help, I dragged it to the edge of the canyon and pushed it over, creating a makeshift slide down to a ledge about halfway to the bottom. "Go," I urged her. "I'll be right behind you." Beth hesitated for just a moment, then sat on the trunk and pushed off. She slid down the rough surface, disappearing into the darkness below. I turned to face the approaching ice puppets, copper spear raised. I needed to buy Beth time to reach the thermal vents. The Decker thing reached me first, its movements jerky but fast. I swung my spear, connecting with its chest. The copper sizzled where it touched the ice, and the creature stumbled back. But there were more coming. Kaminsky, the hikers, and others I didn't recognize, all moving with that same horrible puppet-like motion. Behind them all was the entity itself, watching with those empty eye sockets. I backed toward the edge of the canyon, keeping the copper spear between me and the ice army. My heel hit the fallen tree trunk, and I knew I had to go now or never. Just as I turned to slide down, something cold grabbed my ankle. The Kaminsky puppet had lunged forward, its icy fingers closing around my boot. "Let go," I yelled, kicking at it with my free foot. Its grip was like iron. Frost began to spread up my pant leg. In desperation, I stabbed down with the copper spear, driving it through the creature's wrist. It made that horrible cracking sound and released me. I threw myself onto the tree trunk and pushed off, sliding down toward the canyon floor. Behind me, I heard the ice puppets following, crashing down the makeshift slide. The bottom of the canyon was warmer, not warm, but less brutally cold. Steam rose from cracks in the rocks, creating a foggy barrier between us and the storm above. I could smell the sulfur from the hot springs. "Beth," I called, searching for her in the mist. "Here." Her voice came from my left, weak but alive. I found her huddled near a steaming vent, the warm air already melting the ice from her clothes. "They're coming," I warned, helping her up. We stumbled deeper into the canyon, following the line of thermal vents. Each one released a small cloud of steam, creating a path through the gloom. The further we went, the warmer it became. Behind us, I heard the ice puppets reaching the canyon floor, that distinctive sound of cracking and refreezing. But they were moving slower now, the heat from the vents affecting them. There. Beth pointed ahead. The main vent. A large crack in the rock face belched steam continuously, creating a small ice-free area around it. The ground was actually warm to the touch. "This is where we make our stand," I said, positioning myself between Beth and the approaching ice creatures. The first puppet appeared through the mist. The Decker thing, parts of it already melting in the relative warmth. It moved awkwardly now, its joints refreezing and thawing with each step. I threw a handful of copper wire at it. Where the wire touched, the ice melted faster, leaving gaping holes in its form. It staggered and collapsed, dissolving into a puddle. "Then, copper works even better here," Beth observed, her voice stronger now. More ice puppets appeared, and we fought them off with our dwindling supply of copper. Some melted simply from the heat of the thermal vent, but I knew the entity itself would be more resilient. Sure enough, the mist parted, and there it stood, 12 feet tall now, its crystalline body gleaming in the dim light. It moved cautiously, staying back from the hottest areas. "Why do you resist?" it asked in that avalanche voice. "All things freeze in the end." "Not today," I answered, holding up my last piece of copper, a pipe about 2 feet long. The entity assessed the situation, those empty eye sockets somehow conveying calculation. Then it did something I didn't expect. It began to grow smaller, more compact, its ice becoming denser and less transparent. "What's it doing?" Beth whispered. "Adapting," I realized. "Becoming more resistant to the heat." Now about human-sized, the entity stepped closer to the thermal vent. Steam rose where its feet touched the warm ground, but it didn't melt as the puppets had. I had one chance, one plan, and Beth wasn't going to like it. "When I move," I told her quietly, "head up that side passage. It leads to another way out of the canyon." "What are you going to do?" she asked, her eyes wide with fear. "Something really stupid," I admitted. "But it's our only chance." Before she could stop me, I charged the entity, copper pipe held out like a spear. It reacted instantly, one arm stretching out to block me. Where the copper touched, its ice sizzled and melted, but it quickly refroze. I ducked under its arm and ran past it, heading deeper into the canyon, away from the thermal vent, and Beth. "Michael!" she screamed. But my plan worked. The entity turned and followed me, ignoring Beth. I was the one it really wanted, the one whose warmth it had tracked across the world. I ran until my lungs burned, leading it to the deepest part of the canyon where I'd discovered something during a summer patrol, a hidden hot spring larger than any other in the park, a pool of water that never froze, even in the coldest winter. Behind me, the entity moved with terrible purpose, no longer bothered by the smaller thermal vents we passed. It had adapted, just as I feared. Finally, I reached the chamber with the hot spring. Steam filled the air, making it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. The pool itself was about 20 feet across, the water bubbling gently. I stopped at the edge of the spring, turning to face the entity. It paused at the entrance to the chamber, studying the steam-filled room. "Nowhere left to run," it said, its voice echoing off the rock walls. "I don't need to run anymore," I replied, holding up my bone amulet. It glowed with an inner light now, warm in my hand. "I just needed to get you here." The entity moved forward cautiously. Even in its condensed form, the extreme heat from the spring was affecting it. Parts of its body dripped and refroze constantly. "Your warmth," it said, reaching for me. "Give it to me." I waited until it was just a few feet away, until I could feel the cold radiating from its body like a negative sun. Then I threw the amulet into the center of the hot spring. The effect was immediate. The water began to glow with the same light as the amulet, getting brighter by the second. The entity turned to flee, sensing the danger too late. "Now," I shouted, though no one could hear me. I tackled the ice creature from behind, wrapping my arms around its cold body. Together we tumbled into the glowing hot spring. The pain was indescribable, like being burned and frozen at the same time. The entity thrashed in my grip, its body melting and reforming rapidly. I held on, dragging it deeper into the pool. The water around us began to boil. The entity's screams were like an avalanche in my ears. I felt my consciousness slipping away, darkness closing in. My last thought was of Beth, hoping she'd made it to safety. Then there was nothing but light and pain and cold and heat all together, tearing me apart atom by atom. And then, darkness. I didn't expect to wake up, but somehow I did. Slowly, painfully. First came sounds, beeping machines, hushed voices, then sensations, softness beneath me, warmth all around, sharp pain everywhere. When I finally managed to open my eyes, bright lights made me squint. I was in a hospital room. Tubes and wires connected me to machines I didn't understand. "He's awake," someone called out. Faces appeared above me. Doctors, nurses, and then Beth. Her right arm was bandaged from fingers to shoulder, but she was alive. Her eyes filled with tears when she saw me looking at her. "Michael," she whispered. "You crazy fool. You actually did it." My throat felt like sandpaper when I tried to speak. A nurse held a cup of water with a straw to my lips. After a few sips, I managed to ask, "How long?" 3 weeks, Beth said. "You've been in a coma for 3 weeks. 3 weeks. It felt like both an eternity and just seconds since I jumped into that hot spring with the ice entity." "What happened?" I croaked. After, Beth sat carefully on the edge of the bed. "The storm broke suddenly. Search and rescue teams were able to get into the park the next morning. They found me first, making my way out of the canyon. I told them where to look for you." She paused, seeming unsure how to continue. "They found you on a rock ledge next, to the hot spring. Your body temperature was so low they thought you were dead at first, but somehow you were still breathing." I tried to process this information. "And the others?" "They found Decker and Kaminsky," she said quietly, "and the hikers, all exactly as we left them. The ice sculptures? Gone. Melted away with the storm." A doctor stepped forward then, clipboard in hand. "Mr. Oakes, you're something of a medical miracle. By all rights, you should have died from hypothermia. Your core temperature was below anything we've seen in a surviving patient." I wasn't surprised. Part of me had died in that hot spring. The warm part. "When can I leave?" I asked. The doctor laughed. "Not for a while yet. You have severe frostbite on most of your body. We're still assessing whether you'll need skin grafts." After they left, Beth stayed behind. She took my hand, my left one, the only part of me without bandages. "The official report says it was an extreme weather event," she told me. "A freak cold snap that caused hypothermia patterns never seen before. Kaminsky's research notes about the ice samples disappeared." "Of course," I said. "Who would believe the truth?" She squeezed my hand. "I believe it. I was there." "Did you tell them about the entity?" I tried. They sent a psychologist to talk to me about trauma-induced hallucinations. We sat in silence for a moment, united by a truth no one else would ever understand. "I requested a transfer," I finally said. "Before all this happened, to Yellowstone." Beth nodded. "I know. They approved it while you were asleep. They think it's best after the trauma." "Will you come with me?" I asked. "To Yellowstone? Of course, someone needs to keep an eye on you." She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. After she left, I lay alone in the hospital room, staring at the ceiling. My body hurt everywhere, but that wasn't what bothered me most. I felt cold, bone-deep cold that the hospital's heating couldn't touch. When the nurse came to check my bandages, I asked to see my right hand, the one that had been most directly in contact with the entity when we fell into the hot spring. She unwrapped it carefully. The skin was pale and waxy, dead-looking. "Severe frostbite," she explained. "They were still hoping to save most of the fingers. But there was something else, something only I could see. Beneath the damaged skin, in the depths of my flesh, a faint, crystalline pattern was forming, like ice growing inside me. I thought about what Margaret Running Elk had told me about the entity. that it hibernated for 40 years, then hunted for one, that it was ancient, a fragment of cosmic ice that fell to Earth before human memory. Now a fragment of it was in me. I asked for my personal items, and the nurse brought a plastic bag containing the few things that had survived: my ranger badge, my watch, and somehow, impossibly, the bone amulet. It should have been at the bottom of the hot spring, but here it was, blackened and cracked but intact. I held it in my good hand, expecting to feel that familiar warmth. Instead, it was cold. As cold as my own skin. 2 months later, I started my new job at Yellowstone National Park. Beth came too, as she'd promised. We never talked about what happened at Glacier, at least not directly, but sometimes I would catch her watching me, a question in her eyes that neither of us dared to speak aloud. The dreams started that first winter. Dreams of ice and snow and hunting. Dreams where I moved through blizzards as easily as walking, through air where the cold was a friend rather than an enemy. Dreams where I was something else, something ancient and patient and hungry. I began wearing gloves all the time, even indoors. The crystalline pattern in my right hand was spreading slowly up my arm, visible only in certain lights, like ice growing beneath my skin. Sometimes, when no one was looking, I would hold my hand up to the window during snowstorms. The snowflakes would change direction, swirling toward my palm as if drawn by a magnet. Margaret Running Elk visited me once, making the long journey from the Blackfeet reservation to Yellowstone. She took one look at me and knew. "You carry a piece of it now," she said. Not a question, but a statement. "Can it be removed?" I asked, already knowing the answer. She shook her head. "The cold that walks chose you. Now you must choose what to do with its power." "I don't want it," I told her. "Yet you have it," she replied simply. "The question is, will you control it or will it control you?" I didn't have an answer then. I'm still looking for one now. The coldest days are the worst, when I feel most alive, most aware, most hungry. On those days, I stay far away from people. Even Beth. Especially Beth. The scientists never did explain what happened at Glacier. How people froze from the inside out. How ice sculptures appeared and disappeared. How I survived. Some mysteries are better left unsolved. But sometimes when the wind howls outside my cabin and the temperature drops below zero, I feel something stirring inside me. Something old and cold and patient. And I wonder if, 40 years from now, when the stars align again and the aurora dances in impossible skies, I'll be the one people whisper about. The ranger who disappeared during the worst winter on record. The cold that walks. The body was dry as autumn leaves, hanging there in the trees like some forgotten Halloween decoration. But this was no decoration. I'd seen enough death in my 15 years as a park ranger to know better. Something had sucked every drop of moisture from that poor soul, leaving behind nothing but a paper-thin shell of what used to be human. I'm Thomas O'Connor, and I've spent most of my life studying insects. Funny how life works. I left my job as an entomologist to become a park ranger after my divorce, thinking I'd find peace in the White Mountain forests of New Hampshire. Instead, I found something that would haunt me forever. It started on a quiet evening in October. The sun was setting behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of purple I usually only saw on moth wings. As the park's night vision expert, I was used to working after dark. What I wasn't used to were the strange lights dancing between the trees, like fireflies that had grown too big. I grabbed my gear, flashlight, radio, and the special night vision goggles I'd modified myself. The air felt wrong, too still. Even the crickets had gone quiet, and in my experience, when insects go silent, something bad is coming. Following the lights deeper into the forest, I found more bodies. 3 of them, all dried out like the first, hanging in the branches like terrible fruit. My hand shook as I called it in on the radio. Dispatch, this is Ranger O'Connor. We've got multiple casualties at Grid Point 7. Send everyone. But the bodies weren't the strangest thing I found that night. No, that honor belonged to the cocoons. They were massive, bigger than a person, and seemed to pulse with their own inner light. The material looked like silk, but felt wrong under my fingers, almost metallic. My old entomologist brain kicked in, measuring and analyzing. Nothing on Earth made cocoons like these. Nothing I'd ever studied anyway. As I was examining the third cocoon, my radio crackled to life. More missing persons reports were coming, in from nearby towns. 4 hikers vanished from the Wilson Trail. 2 campers gone from their tent, leaving everything behind. A teenage girl who stepped into her backyard to check on a weird light and never came back. I knew I should wait for backup. The smart thing would be to secure the area and let the proper authorities handle it. But then I heard it, a sound like massive wings beating the air, and a soft, haunting hum that made my teeth ache. Something moved in the shadows between the trees, something huge. My heart pounding, I switched on my night vision goggles. What I saw through them made me wish I hadn't. There in the darkness was a shape that shouldn't exist. It had the basic form of a person, if that person was 8 feet tall, and had giant moth wings stretching out from its back. The wings had patterns on them that seemed to move and swirl, and just looking at them made my head spin. I tried to run, but my legs wouldn't move. The patterns were doing something to my brain, making everything fuzzy. The last thing I remember before passing out was the sound of those wings getting closer and closer and closer. When I woke up hours later, the thing was gone. But I knew one thing for certain. My peaceful life as a park ranger was over. Something terrible had come to White Mountain, something that turned people into empty husks, and somehow, I had a feeling my background in studying moths wasn't a coincidence. This was just the beginning, and as I stared at those mysterious cocoons glowing in the dark, I realized that everything I knew about the natural world was about to change. The next morning I sat in the ranger station with 5 other people, all of us looking tired and worried. Sarah Chen, our best tracker, kept checking her phone for news about the missing people. Mike Rodriguez, the local sheriff, hadn't touched his coffee. Dr. Emily Parker, a scientist from the State University, was studying photos of the cocoons. Next to her sat Dave Wilson, another ranger who knew these woods better than anyone, and Kate Sullivan, a search and rescue expert who'd seen her share of strange things in these mountains. "Those bodies you found," Dr. Parker said, tapping the photos spread across the table. "It's like something literally drained them dry. I've never seen anything like it." I nodded, my hands wrapped around my cold coffee mug. "Whatever did this isn't normal. We need to search the area again, but this time as a team. No one goes anywhere alone." The others agreed, but I could see the fear in their eyes. They'd all heard my story about the giant moth thing, and even though no one said it out loud, I knew they believed me. You don't work in these woods for years without learning that some things can't be explained. We headed out just as the sun was starting to set. Each of us carried special UV flashlights, my idea, based on what I knew about moths being sensitive to ultraviolet light. Dave checked his watch and frowned. "It's 6:43 p.m. Everyone sync your watches. If anything weird happens, we need to know exactly when." The weird stuff started almost right away. First came the lights, dancing between the trees like before. Sarah went to check one out, and when she came back 5 minutes later, her watch showed she'd been gone for nearly an hour. She couldn't remember anything about that missing time. "Something's messing with our heads," Kate said, shining her flashlight into the darkness, like we're being watched, studied. She was right. I could feel it too. That creepy feeling of eyes on us from every direction. The air felt heavy, like right before a storm, but the sky was clear. Then Mike found something that made my blood run cold. Another cocoon, but this one was different. It was partially open, and inside was a person, still alive but just barely. Jenny Mills, one of the missing hikers. Her eyes were open but empty, staring at nothing. Her body was warm, her heart was beating, but it was like nobody was home inside her head. We called for a medical helicopter, but I knew regular doctors wouldn't be able to help her. Whatever those moth creatures had done to her went beyond normal medicine. As night fell completely, things got worse. The lights got brighter, more aggressive. They would appear right in front of us, making us dizzy and confused. Mike tried to radio for backup, but all we got was static and a weird humming sound, the same sound I'd heard the night before. "We need to get out of here," Sarah said, her voice shaking. But when we tried to leave, we kept getting turned around. Trees we'd marked somehow moved behind us. Paths that should have led back to the ranger station just brought us deeper into the woods. Emily grabbed my arm suddenly, pointing up. "Thomas, look!" Through the branches, I saw them. Dozens of shapes moving in the darkness. Giant wings blocking out the stars. The air filled with that horrible humming sound. And my head started to feel fuzzy again. "Everyone, UV lights up," I shouted. "Don't look directly at their wings." But I was too late. Mike and Kate were already staring upward, their faces blank and peaceful. The patterns on the moth's wings had caught them, hypnotizing them just like they'd almost got me the night before. As I watched in horror, my friend started walking toward the creatures like they were in a trance. Dave tried to grab Kate, but she pushed him away, her movements jerky and strange, like a puppet on strings. "They're connected somehow," Emily whispered, keeping her eyes on the ground. "Like they share one mind." I grabbed my UV light and pointed it upward, hoping it would drive the creatures away. The beam caught one of the moths, and for a second I heard a sound like a scream. Not human, but not animal either. Something in between. That's when I realized we weren't just dealing with some new species or weird mutation. These things were intelligent. They were organizing, testing us, learning. And somehow I knew that this was just their first move in a game we didn't even know we were playing. The moon had disappeared completely, leaving us in the darkest night I'd ever seen. Mike and Kate were gone, walking off into the darkness with those things. Dave, Sarah, Emily, and I huddled together under a big oak tree. Our UV lights pointed outward like a circle of protection. "What's happening in town?" Sarah whispered, checking her phone. "Oh, God." She showed us the screen. People were posting videos from Milton, the nearest town. Hundreds of folks were walking out of their homes, staring at the sky with empty eyes. Kids, parents, teachers, all of them moving like sleepwalkers toward the forest. "They're doing it to the whole town," Dave said, his voice shaking. But how? I thought about everything I knew about moths, trying to make sense of it. Moths communicate using pheromones, chemical signals. But these things, they're using something stronger, like they're broadcasting their thoughts somehow. Emily nodded. "Look at the patterns on their wings. They're not random. They move in a way that affects our brains, like a natural hypnotic device." Suddenly, the humming sound got louder. The air felt like it was vibrating. Through my night vision goggles, I saw them descending. Dozens of moth creatures forming a circle around us. They were even bigger up close, their wings spanning, whiter than a car. Their bodies looked almost human, but wrong. Too tall, too thin, with heads that reminded me of moth faces. That's when I saw her. In the middle of the moth circle was one that was different from the rest. Bigger, with wings that glowed like moonlight. While the others were brown and gray, she was pure white. The queen. "Don't look at their wings." I shouted, but it was too late for Dave. He was staring at the queen's wings, his mouth hanging open. The patterns on her wings were more complex than the others, swirling and shifting like a living thing. "So beautiful," Dave mumbled, taking a step forward. "They want to show us something wonderful." Sarah grabbed him, but he pushed her away. Just like Kate and Mike, he walked toward the moths like he was in a dream. That's when things got even weirder. The air around us started to change. I saw my mom's garden, even though she died years ago. Sarah screamed about seeing her childhood home. Emily said she could see her college laboratory. They were making us hallucinate, showing us places, and people we missed. But my UV light had hurt them earlier. "Emily," I called out. "The ultraviolet. Their wings. They're like solar panels. They need darkness to work." Emily grabbed her UV light and pointed it at the queen. The creature made a sound like radio static mixed with a scream. The hallucinations flickered and faded. Keep your lights on the queen, I shouted. All three of us pointed our UV lights at her. The giant moth creature backed away, her wings folding to protect herself. The other moths moved closer, trying to shield their queen. That's when I noticed something strange about their movements. They weren't acting like separate creatures. They moved together like fingers on one hand. They really were connected, sharing one mind. Through the chaos, I heard Sarah's voice. Thomas, look at their wings again, but not at the patterns. Look at the edges. I checked through my goggles, being careful to avoid the hypnotic patterns. She was right. The wings had tiny structures along the edges that looked mechanical, almost like antennae or transmitters. They're not just moths that got big, I said. Someone or something made them this way. They're engineered. Suddenly, the queen's wings spread wide, and a blast of energy knocked us down. Our UV lights went flying. In my head, I heard a voice that wasn't a voice, more like pictures and feelings pushed directly into my brain. We are the next step. Evolution guided by design. You will join our song. The queen was talking to us, but not with words. I saw flashes of other worlds, other skies filled with giant moths. I saw humans being changed, becoming part of the moth colony. I saw their plan to transform our whole planet. Run! I managed to shout, fighting against the pictures in my head. Back to the ranger station. We ran, stumbling through the dark woods. Behind us, the moths followed, their wings making sounds like helicopter blades. But they didn't chase us directly. They were herding us, driving us in a specific direction. Sarah tripped and fell. When I helped her up, she pointed ahead with a shaking hand. Thomas, oh no. In the clearing in front of us stood all the missing people from town, including Mike, Kate, and Dave. Their eyes were empty, and their mouths were turned up in peaceful smiles. Above them, the moths circled like giant guardian angels. The queen's voice filled my head again. You see, they are happy now. They are part of something greater. Soon, you will understand. I gripped my backup UV light, the small one from my keychain. It wasn't much, but it was all we had left. Emily, Sarah, I whispered. When I say run, head east. The sun will be up soon. The queen raised her wings, and the patterns began to swirl. We were running out of time. Dawn was coming, but would we survive to see it? The sun rose to a changed world. Military helicopters flew over the forest, and soldiers with big guns blocked all the roads into Milton. Sarah, Emily, and I watched from the ranger station as huge trucks rolled in, carrying scientific equipment and what looked like giant UV spotlights. This isn't just local anymore, Emily said, pointing to the TV. Every news channel showed the same thing. More towns reporting strange lights and missing people. More stories about sleepwalkers heading into the woods at night. A sharp knock at the door made us jump. A tall woman in an army uniform walked in, followed by two men in black. Suits Colonel Rebecca Hayes, she said. We're taking over this operation. You three are the only witnesses who've seen these creatures up close and stayed unchanged. We need your help. Before we could answer, my phone rang. The name on the screen made my heart stop. Lisa, my ex-wife. Lisa, are you okay? Her voice sounded strange, dreamy. Thomas? The lights are so pretty. They're calling us to see something wonderful. Lisa, listen to me. Where are you? In the garden. The moths want to show us their world. You should come see. The call cut off. I grabbed my jacket, but Colonel Hayes blocked the door. Mr. O'Connor, you can't go out there. The entire area is under quarantine. That's my wife, I shouted, then caught myself. Ex-wife, but I can't just leave her out there. We found more cocoons, one of the men in black said. They're appearing in backyards, parks, even inside people's homes. The moths are getting bolder. Sarah, who'd been quiet all morning, suddenly pointed at the colonel's laptop screen. What's that place? The screen showed a map with a blinking red dot deep in the forest. Around it were the words, Facility 23. Restricted access. Colonel Hayes quickly closed the laptop, but I'd seen enough. There's a government bunker out there, isn't there? You knew about these things before they showed up here. The colonel was quiet for a long moment. Finally, she sighed. Facility 23 was built in 1982 to study unusual biological phenomena. 3 months ago, our sensors detected something entering Earth's atmosphere, something that broke up into multiple pieces and scattered across the country. They're not from Earth, Emily whispered. I knew their wing structures looked impossible. Suddenly, every phone in the room started buzzing. Emergency alerts. More people were walking into the woods, hundreds of them, and the moths weren't just controlling them anymore. They were changing them. Sir, a soldier burst into the room. The hive mind, and it's getting stronger. Our men are starting to hear voices in their heads. I felt it too, that strange pressure in my mind, like someone knocking on a door, trying to get in. From the way everyone was rubbing their temples, they felt it too. Colonel Hayes grabbed her radio. All units, fall back. Use the UV shields, don't let them in your heads. But it was too late for some of the soldiers. Through the window, I watched in horror as dozens of them dropped their weapons and started walking toward the woods, their faces peaceful and blank. The cocoons, Emily said suddenly. They're not just for storing victims. They're changing people's DNA, making them more like the moths. The colonel nodded grimly. We found traces of engineered retroviruses in the cocoon silk. Whatever these things are, they're not just invading Earth. They're trying to transform it. My phone buzzed again. A text from Lisa. Garden so pretty now, all wrapped up safe and warm. Come join us, Thomas. I showed the colonel. That's my ex-wife. She lives on Cedar Street, please. Colonel Hayes studied the message, then looked at me. Okay, we're sending a team to check the neighborhood. You can come, but only to help us understand what we're dealing with. No rescue attempts without authorization. As we drove through town, I saw cocoons everywhere, hanging from trees, attached to houses, glowing with that strange inner light. The moths were turning Milton into their nest, and my ex-wife was somewhere out there becoming one of them. The colonel's radio crackled. Ma'am, the nest, it's growing, and we've detected some kind of signal being broadcast from Facility 23, the government bunker, Sarah said. What if something in there called them here? The colonel didn't answer, but her face told me Sarah might be right. As we turned onto Cedar Street, I saw Lisa's garden. It was covered in silk-like strands that seemed to pulse with light, and in the middle, hanging from her favorite apple tree, was a huge cocoon. Lisa! I ran toward the garden, but soldiers held me back. The cocoon twitched. Inside, I could see a shadow moving, but it wasn't shaped like a person anymore. Colonel Hayes raised her radio. All units, prepare for full evacuation of Milton. Whatever's in that bunker, whatever called them, here, it's waking up, and tonight, when the sun sets... She didn't need to finish. We all knew. Tonight would be different. Tonight would be war. The cocoon pulsed again, and in my head, I heard Lisa's voice, but it wasn't quite her anymore. Join us, Thomas. The change is so beautiful. Above us, dark clouds were gathering, but they weren't clouds at all. They were moths, thousands of them, waiting for night to fall. And somewhere in the forest, in a secret government bunker, something was calling them home. Night fell too quickly. Our team, now wearing special UV protective helmets, crept through the dark forest toward Facility 23. I was with Colonel Hayes, Sarah, Emily, and a group of soldiers carrying what they called UV pulse rifles, weapons designed to shoot beams of ultraviolet light. The moths are letting us get close, Sarah whispered. This feels like a trap. She was right. The forest was too quiet. No giant wings blocking the stars. No hypnotic lights dancing between trees. Just silence and the feeling of being watched. Beer. Found the bunker hidden under a fake hill. The heavy metal door was torn open from the inside, like something had burst out. As we walked down the dark stairs, our flashlights showed claw marks on the walls. "What were you keeping down here?" I asked the colonel. She shined her light on an empty glass tank, bigger than a house. 30 years ago, we found something in the mountains. A cocoon, different from the others. We thought it was dead. Emily examined the broken tank. "You kept it all these years?" "We studied it," Colonel Hayes said. "Then 3 months ago, when those objects fell from space, it woke up, started sending out signals. We couldn't contain it." A sound echoed through the bunker like huge wings fluttering. Everyone raised their weapons. "Welcome, curious ones." The voice wasn't in our heads this time. It was real, filling the air with a sound like rustling leaves. "We've been waiting for you." The queen moth stepped out of the shadows. She looked different now, more human-like, but still wrong. Her wings glowed with swirling patterns, but our protective helmets kept us safe from their power. "What are you?" Colonel Hayes demanded. "We are the next step," the queen said. "Long ago, our kind seeded many worlds waiting for the right moment to bloom. Your government found one of our sleeper scouts, and now the great change begins." The floor shook. Above us, we heard thousands of wings beating the air. The whole moth colony was gathering. "The cocoons," Emily said. "They're all going to hatch tonight, aren't they?" The queen's wings spread wide. "Yes. Your world is ready for evolution. Your people will join our great hive mind. No more loneliness, no more separation. All will be one." "Where's Lisa?" I stepped forward. "What have you done to her?" "See for yourself." A figure stepped out of the darkness. It looked almost like Lisa, but her skin had a silvery sheen, and small wings were growing from her back. Her eyes were huge and black like a moth's. "Thomas." Her voice was a mix of human and insect sounds. "It's wonderful. I can feel everyone's thoughts. We're all connected now. Join us." "No." I grabbed my UV rifle. "This isn't evolution. It's invasion." The queen laughed, a sound like dry leaves in the wind. "You still don't understand. We are not taking over your world. We are saving it. Humans live in isolation, trapped in their separate minds. We offer unity, peace, perfect understanding. By taking away our freedom," Sarah raised her rifle. "By turning us into drones?" Suddenly the air filled with moths. They poured into the bunker like a flood of wings and legs. Our UV rifles lit up the darkness, sending beams of purple light that made the moths scream and fall. "The prototype," Colonel Hayes shouted over the chaos. "Use the pulse cannon." 2 soldiers wheeled in a massive UV weapon, but before they could, fire at Lisa and other half-changed humans attacked them. I watched in horror as more people emerged from the shadows. Everyone who had been taken, now part moth, part human. "Lisa, please!" I tried to reach her. "Fight it!" For a second, I saw something flicker in her black eyes, a memory of who she used to be. But then the queen's wings flashed, and Lisa attacked me. The battle was chaos. UV beams lit up the darkness. Moths fell from the air. Half-changed humans fought against soldiers, and through it all the queen's voice echoed, "You cannot stop evolution. We are the future." Emily reached the pulse cannon. "Thomas, the queen's wings. They're like receivers. If we overload them with UV light..." I understood. The queen wasn't just their leader. She was like a giant antenna connecting the whole hive mind. "Everyone," I shouted. "All UV weapons on the queen. Full power. Every UV rifle, every light we had, all aimed at the queen's wings." The bunker filled with blinding purple light. The queen screamed, a sound that shook the walls. All around us, moths fell from the air. The half-changed humans collapsed. "And you are..." My head, I felt something break. The queen's mind, connected to thousands of others, was overloading. Through her, I could feel every moth, every changed human, all their minds linked together. Lisa grabbed my hand. Her eyes were changing back to human. "Thomas, help!" The queen's wings began to crack, leaking light. "You don't understand why the change..." cannot be stopped. The pulse cannon fired one final blast. The queen's wings shattered like glass. Every moth in the colony screamed at once. The hive mind broke apart like a mirror falling to pieces, and then silence. Lisa and the others were human again, unconscious but alive. Many of the moths had fallen, their wings burned away by the UV weapons. But in the chaos, I saw dozens of them escape through the bunker's broken roof, flying away into the night. The queen's broken body lay on the floor, but her last words echoed in my head. The change cannot be stopped. She was right. Even as we helped the survivors out of the bunker, I could feel it. A tiny piece of the hive mind still alive in my brain, in all our brains. We had won the battle, but the moths were still out there, growing, spreading, waiting, and somewhere in the dark sky above us, their children were flying to new nests, carrying the promise of evolution in their wings. 2 weeks later, I sat in Lisa's garden, watching her pull weeds from around her tomato plants. The cocoon silk was gone. The military had cleaned everything up, but you could still see lighter patches on the trees where they'd been attached. "Do you still feel it?" she asked quietly, not looking up from her gardening. "That connection?" I nodded. We all did. Everyone who'd been there that night. A tiny buzz in the back of our minds, like a radio playing very far away. The doctor said it would fade with time, but I wasn't so sure. Sometimes when I was falling asleep, I could feel others out there. Sarah dealing with nightmares in her apartment across town. Emily working late in her lab, studying samples from the moth creatures. Even Colonel Hayes somewhere in Washington, worrying about reports of strange lights in other cities. The official story was simple. A gas leak had caused mass hallucinations. The missing people had just been confused and wandered into the woods. The cocoons were some kind of weird fungus. Nothing to worry about. But we knew better. "I saw the news this morning," Lisa said, finally looking at me. 3 hikers missing, in Oregon. Their campsite was covered in silk. I pulled out my phone and showed her the message I'd gotten from Colonel Hayes. More nests found, different states. They're evolving, changing their patterns, learning. The moths that escaped that night were smarter now. They didn't attack in big groups anymore. They worked slowly, carefully, staying hidden. The military was hunting them, but it was like trying to catch shadows. "Do you think we'll ever be normal again?" Lisa asked. I thought about the dreams I'd been having. Dreams of flying through strange skies, of worlds covered in giant cocoons, of civilizations transformed into something new. Dreams that didn't feel like dreams at all. "I don't know," I said honestly. "But at least we're awake. At least we can fight back." Lisa nodded and reached for my hand. We sat there in her garden, watching the sunset. Somewhere in the growing darkness, moths were flying, spinning their silk, making their plans. The invasion wasn't over. Maybe it was just beginning, but we knew what they were now. We knew their weaknesses. And most importantly, we knew we weren't crazy. The moths were real, and they were still out there, waiting for their next chance to change our world. I keep my UV flashlight with me all the time now. So does everyone else who was there that night. We watch the skies, check the news for strange disappearances, and stay in touch with each other through that weird connection in our minds. Because the Queen was right about one thing. Evolution can't be stopped. But maybe, just maybe, we can help guide it in the right direction. Keep humanity human while still growing, still changing. Every night before bed, I look out my window at the dark trees, and sometimes when the moon is right, I see large shadows moving between the branches. They're getting better at hiding, getting smarter. But so are we. The war isn't over. It's just quieter now, more secret. But as long as there are people who remember what happened in White Mountain that night, there's hope. We'll keep watching, keep fighting, keep protecting those who don't know the truth. Because the moths are still out there, still spinning their silk, still waiting for their chance to finish what they started. And when they come back, and they will come back, we'll be ready.